A beast will be summoned in 30 seconds. Tame it or defeat it. Fail both, and you become one. My roommate James shoved me into the hallway and locked the door. He heard the same warning I did, and he wanted the beast to take me instead of him. I grabbed the fire axe as my beast tore through the floor. It ripped open my arm. I buried the axe in its skull. Inside, James had hidden. He failed, so the beast he summoned fused with him and remade him into a weak, hunched corpse. He still wore his gray hoodie and his father's steel watch, but he had no claws and no armor. Defeating my own beast kept me human and gave me a choice. Summon a random replacement or claim an unbound monster nearby. I was still furious about the locked door. I chose James. The victory also earned me a rare hidden reward. A blood-red book opened a feeding bar. Anything my beast ate could become an inherited trait. At 100%, the beast would evolve. I held a bright red apple to James's mouth. He took one bite, and the bar rose from 0 to 1%. Then I fed him a kitchen knife. Door hinges. Pans. Radiator brackets. Pipes. Every useful piece of metal I could rip from the flats around us. The bar reached 100%. James grew to 2 meters. Metal claws replaced his fingers. Black plates sealed over his body until he looked like a living suit of armor. The steel watch sank into his forearm but remained visible. The new bond made my body stronger too. The roommate who left me to die had become my evolving monster. Then something charged up the stairs. The stairwell door slammed open. A man-shaped corpse came across the landing at a run. It was one of the people who had failed the same test as James. The blood-red book called it a shambler. James crossed the hallway before I gave an order. One metal hand caught the shambler by the throat. Another tore its head free. The fight lasted 2 seconds. That should have felt like winning. Instead, the first evolution had swallowed every scrap of useful metal in the building. I could choose what entered the feeding bar. I still could not choose what came out. The book made that problem visible. Its first page carried James's name, his current form, his abilities, and a price beside anything he could eat. Every page after it stayed sealed shut in one solid block. The book had chosen me, but it had not explained who wrote it or what those locked pages wanted. I tried a heavy cleaver after the claws appeared. It moved the new bar by only 0.5%. The moment James gained a trait, everything from the grade below lost most of its value. Each evolution demanded a better kind of material than the one before it. Outside the window, red fog covered the street. Phones were dead. Cars sat where their engines had stopped. Above the fog, an eye bigger than a whole city block hung in the sky, with its mark on every person alive. I spent that first morning hour walking floors. I'd been through them. Everyone looked empty, like movers had left. Bare skirting boards. Kitchen drawers with the handles unscrewed off the fronts. 10 floors of the building I'd lived in for 2 years, and there was nothing left on any of them worth bending down for. The last thing standing was a radiator on the 13th floor landing, bolted to the wall under a window. I got the crowbar behind it and leaned back until the bolts tore out of the plaster. Then I carried the radiator down 2 flights on my shoulder like a rolled-up rug. A week earlier, hospital bed. James was where I'd left him, standing between the couch and the television. 2 meters of black plate, arms hanging. That ugly steel watch was still set under the skin of his forearm with the face up, still telling me it was 20 past 8. I dropped the radiator in. Nothing. The bar did not twitch. Even the last radiator belonged to the old grade. James was the best thing I owned, and the building had nothing left to give him. So I went to find something better. The flat across the hall had a chest of drawers shoved against the door. That told me 2 things. Somebody was alive in there, and they were about to have a bad morning. I got my shoulder into it twice, and the second one took the frame with it. Kevin Wells came at me with a bread knife, and I had him against his own fridge before he finished swinging. His girlfriend, Emma Shaw, didn't scream, which I respected. She stood in the kitchen doorway holding a saucepan in both hands like a bat, and asked me what I wanted. "Half your food," I said, "and every piece of metal in this flat." Here's the part I want to be clear about, because the way that sounds and the way it went are 2 different things. I didn't take it off them. I showed them why I was taking it. I let go of Kevin. Then I put down the blood book. Flat on their counter. The book priced their kitchen. They watched. The sink. The taps. The cupboard hinges. The legs of the table they ate off. Numbers came up beside every one of them. Small ugly numbers, and then a total at the bottom. 9%, I told them. Everything you own that isn't food adds up to 9%. See, at 100, James stops being what cleared this floor last night and turns into whatever comes next, like filling a tank without choosing the road. Emma looked at the total for a long moment. Then she set the saucepan down, went into the bedroom, and came back with a curtain rail. Kevin brought me a toolbox. Not a drawer of scrap. Not bent forks. An actual red steel toolbox with a lid that latched. Wrenches inside. A socket set. 2 hammers. He worked with his hands. He held it out at arm's length like he expected me to take it and hit him with it. I set the toolbox by the door. Then the thought hit me. Not the last time. A man who owns tools is worth more than the tools are. Then I made them watch the rest, because a number on a page is only a number on a page. I took the loose brick off their balcony, the one holding a plant pot down, and I fed it. The bar moved 0.03%. Emma actually leaned in to find the change. I fed a 2-liter bottle of water and got 0.05%. A broken chair leg out of their hall cupboard got 0.08%. 3 things the size of my head, and together they didn't add up to a rounding error. Then I took one fistful of Kevin's screws out of the toolbox, maybe 40 of them, and dropped them in. The bar jumped. You could see it move from across the room. Take notes. In this world, rock, water, and wood were pocket change. The whole world out there was made of those 3, and they were worth nothing. Out on the landing, I put my boot against the radiator and it rocked and did nothing else for me. Same grade I'd spent all night feeding him. That whole grade stopped paying the moment James turned black. Kevin was watching from his doorway. I held up one of his screws so he could see which of us had brought something worth having. See, tool steel is harder than a wall, and that was the lesson twice in one morning. Metal was still worth everything, just never the easy kind buildings are made of, like a shop that takes 20-pound notes but won't take coins. That was when the book pulled me somewhere. I can't dress it up better than that. The page went white under my hand. I was standing in a flat black room. James stood in front of me. Not in the living room, in my own head. The 2 of us, and nothing else. Everything he could do was hanging off him, laid out like coats on a rack. The claws. The thing that had turned him black overnight and stopped an axe at a centimeter. Iron skin. That was the whole name of it. I reached out. Then I took iron skin. I didn't understand what that meant until my hand closed on it. See, whatever James can do, I can take and wear. It's like a borrowed coat. I only have to own him, not become him. I came back into my body in Kevin and Emma's kitchen with my arm going cold from the elbow down. Emma got there first. She picked the bread knife up off the floor and asked if she could, and I said yes. She drew the knife across the back of my forearm. Hard enough to open me. The blade skated off with a noise, like a key, down a car door. Then I walked out into the corridor, past both of them, and put my fist through the door of the empty flat at the end. Not through it. Off it. The whole door came out of the frame with all 3 hinges still screwed to it and landed flat on the hall carpet. I stood there shaking my hand out, because it turns out you can copy the armor and still feel the punch. I went up a floor with the toolbox to see who else was home. Mark Doloon opened his door on the chain. He looked behind me. 2 meters of black plate. Then Mark spoke through the gap. He wasn't paying a fee. Not to a thug in his own building. His wife Anna leaned into the gap and repeated the insult with better words. Then, without taking a breath, they offered me a job. They'd feed me, they said, if I stood outside their door at night. They'd be generous. They said generous like they were doing me a favor. Then Mark said the quiet part. A man with a monster was still the man holding the leash. And the man holding the leash is always holding it for somebody else. He did not even take the chain off. To Mark, James was hired muscle and I was a thug collecting scraps. He expected the steel door to finish the conversation. I didn't argue. I told Mark it was a lovely door. Then, I went back down to my own floor and put the pair of them in the part of my head where I keep things I'm coming back to. Remember that door? Kevin and Emma were waiting in my corridor with a shopping bag. Rice, tins, a bag of frozen chips already going soft. Half the food was more than half. They'd rounded up. Kevin asked if they could come with me instead of sitting in there waiting for whatever came up the stairs next. I said yes, and I said the terms out loud so nobody could pretend later. What we find gets fed to James first and split between us second. Nobody argues with me in a corridor. If you want one of your own, I'll get you one. 3 of us now, and Emma shook my hand like we just bought a car. That evening, the light over the district dropped a shade, the way a room does when a cloud crosses. Except, there was no cloud. The light never came back. Everything on the street that night was a little worse than it had been the night before. After they'd gone to sleep on my floor, I stood at the window and did the maths I didn't want to do. See? Half a building had been worth exactly 1 upgrade. Every flat, every hinge, every knife, and every screw across 10 floors bought me one, like spending a whole paycheck on a meal. There were 10 more floors underneath me, packed with people and pipes and doors and everything else James eats. I'd lived here 2 years. I had never once been downstairs. The stairwell door on 11 had been shut since the first night. I opened it with my shoulder. I could do that now. James went first. He always went first. 2 meters of black plating. He took the steps 2 at a time. He didn't make the noise a thing that size should make. James's ugly steel watch stayed under the skin of his forearm. Phase up. Still keeping time nobody needed. Kevin came after him with the red toolbox banging his knee. Emma came after Kevin with a bread knife she refused to put down. 3 of us, and 1 of him, going down into 10 floors we had never seen. Kevin and Emma had both saved the replacement choice after their first trials. A saved choice could claim a living unbound beast, or a freshly defeated one if the body remained intact. The survivor had to accept the bond personally. Nobody else could make that choice for them. There were 3 shamblers on the 10th floor landing. The slow kind. Still wearing whatever they'd had when things stopped going well. James went through the first 2 before I'd finished the stairs. He caught the 3rd one by both shoulders, put it against the wall, held it there. Arms locked. Feet off the ground, screaming into the concrete about 10 centimeters from Kevin's face. Your turn, I said. Kevin looked at me like I'd handed him a live wire. It's moving. James can hold it, but you have to make the choice yourself. I nodded at the toolbox. Hammer. Top of the spine. Don't stop halfway. Kevin needed 6 swings and threw up afterwards, which is fine, everybody does. What matters came while Kevin was still on his knees. His hands were shaking. The mark on the back of his hand opened. The replacement choice appeared. Summon a random beast, or claim an unbound monster nearby. Kevin chose the shambler at his feet. It rose wearing the damage he'd done, and stood behind him like a dog that had always been his. A delivery jacket. 1 shoe. His own beast, out of his own hands. He did not receive a blood-red book. That reward was still mine alone. I had left the shambler intact instead of tearing it apart. A body I destroy is a body nobody else can claim. That's the method. Emma had defeated her first assigned beast and saved her replacement choice too. She got hers on 9. Her beast came out of a rubbish chute cupboard. It moved like a thrown rock. Low, fast, and wrong. A rat the size of a dog with its skin sliding around on it. She stabbed the rot rat 11 times. The replacement choice appeared, and Emma claimed the creature at her feet. When the rot rat came back up, its mouth was green. Emma stood there flexing her free hand. She kept saying, it's in my fingers, and that's how we learned she'd bought herself a poison. We found what was left of a man on 8. He had a wardrobe across his door. A phone charger looped round the handle. He'd done everything right except face his assigned beast. He'd never tamed it and he'd never killed it. He asked us if we had water. His shoulders had already gone the wrong shape under his shirt. His voice came from lower down than a voice should. Emma started to say something. I put my hand flat on her back and moved her along the corridor. There was nothing in that room for us. The man was already dead. We didn't talk about it. We just went down. On the way I took a detour back up 4 floors because I never forget a bill. Mark Dolan had a steel security door, the proper kind, the kind you pay extra for. He'd spoken through that door back in the first week, called me a thug, said he wasn't paying a fee to some kid with a monster. So I stood on his mat and I said, Mark, last time, and he told me to get away from his property. James hit the door once. Not a kick. 1 open palm, from the shoulder. The whole middle of that door bowed inward around the shape of a hand. Then the frame popped out of the wall on the hinge side. Anna Park screamed somewhere behind Dolun. Dolun didn't say a single word while we carried out his tools. His 2 good pans, every metal thing in that flat. He was still silent when I stepped over the ruined doorstep. Then I told him the fee had gone up for next time. You remember the bill. Ground floor. Loading bay. Travis Stone was standing on the roof of his own van, a tire iron in each hand. Big guy. Beard you could lose keys in, a high-visibility vest, and about 9 hours of very bad decisions behind him. A shambler was in the bay with Travis. It had been a person once. Then it kept going. Heavy through the shoulders, dragging 1 long arm. The shambler had already taken his wing mirror off. Travis didn't ask us for help. He looked at me, then at the 2-meter black thing standing at my elbow, and he said, That yours? He is. Then I'll pay. He had the back doors open already and the van was full. Crowbars, pipe, scaffold clamps, 100 kilos of the stuff. All of it. You kill that, you take the lot. I looked at the van. I felt almost sorry for Travis. I'd already fed James a building's worth of exactly that grade of metal. The whole load wasn't going to move my number by anything worth counting. Then I looked at the man standing on top of the van. Travis had watched a monster take his mirror off. He'd climbed up instead of running. Then he priced his own rescue out loud without whining once. You defeated your first assigned beast, didn't you? I asked. Travis nodded. Then keep the van. You're driving it. Come with us, and I'll find you something worth spending that choice on. James killed the shambler in the loading bay in about 4 seconds. Travis got down off the roof, put a tire iron through his belt. Then he said, Travis, and shook my hand like we'd agreed a delivery slot. Team of 4. Then I fed James the corpse. See, I've been dropping shamblers into James all the way down, getting about 3% a body. Then less. Then less. Like a shop cutting the trade-in price once it has too many. The whole van of crowbars moved the feeding bar 1%, and I said so out loud so nobody wasted an afternoon carrying pipe. Travis looked at his van, then at me. So what does move it? Bodies. 11 floors of stairwell meant a lot of bodies. The sham blur from the loading bay was just the one that happened to be last. The bar went over the top on a corpse worth barely anything. Travis had known me 9 minutes. Now he got to watch what that means. James came apart at the shoulders. Not an injury. An opening. The plating slid out and around and rebuilt itself wider. There had been 2 arms. Now there were 4. 2 long ones high. 2 shorter ones set low. He stood up out of the change 2.5 meters tall. His head was a clear 30 centimeters above the doorframe. Emma sat down on a pallet. Travis said a word I won't repeat. James wasn't a man in armor anymore. That was the thing. Every shape he'd worn up to then had still been a person underneath, and this one had stopped pretending. He picked up a scaffold pole with the bottom 2 hands. He bent it flat with the top 2 at the same time without bracing against anything. He didn't have to choose which pair to use. You see the jump. The light over the district dropped another shade while we stood there looking at James, and nobody said anything about it. The camp was behind the fire doors on 3. 27 people. Mattresses in the corridor. A whiteboard with a duty roster. Captain Er-un Lee ran all of it. Wiry, torn uniform shirt, hands open. His eyes were doing arithmetic. Behind Er-un, along the far wall, sat a second group that hadn't stood up when we came in. 9 or 10 people. 3 beasts. A lean man in a leather jacket sat in the middle. He looked at James the way you look at a car you intend to own. Drake Fox. He didn't introduce himself. One of his people did it for him, which told me everything. It went wrong in the stairwell, the way it was always going to. Fox's man came up the flight to tell us where we'd be sleeping. His beast came ahead with its arms out. A big one, honestly. Bigger than anything the camp had. Sue moves. That's what it took. James's bottom left hand caught the arm at the wrist. His top right came across in a line. The arm crossed the stairwell. Then it hit the landing floor with a slap that everybody in that building heard. Nobody moved. 27 people, and I could hear the roster board tapping the wall. 3 rooms, I said, to Er-un Lee in front of all of them. 3rd floor, east side, with doors. We feed ourselves. I'll fight for this camp, and I'll fight next to you, and I will never once take an order from you. If that's a problem, say it now while everyone's listening. Er-un looked at the arm on the floor for a second longer than he needed to. Then he said, 3 rooms, and that was the deal. Made in public in front of every person in that tower. In front of everyone who'd been planning to tell that crowd what to think about me. Keep them in mind. Afterwards I walked to the balcony the camp had been using. They'd been tipping bodies over the rail for 3 days. Down into the fog at the bottom of the light well. You can't keep bodies inside. I sent James over the edge to count them. James came back up with nothing. No bodies. Not bones. Not scraps. Not a mark on the concrete. Just a wet drag heading towards the street. The fog down there was moving against the wind again. Something was eating them, and it was eating them faster than 27 people could throw them down. So I found Er-un Lee at his whiteboard and I made him an offer. My beast and my 3 people, and we clear 10 floors of this building in 1 day, every room, every corridor, top to bottom. In exchange, his camp got safe floors, and I got one thing. Every monster nobody claims, I said. Every corpse left after the replacement choices are spent. They're mine, and nobody asks what for. He said yes so fast I could see him thinking he'd robbed me. Behind him, Fox was watching, and he was the only one in that room close to working it out. Kevin waited until we were in the corridor before he asked why anybody would want a floor's worth of corpses. Er-un was already turning back to the whiteboard. Fox had stopped watching me. To both of them, I had traded the whole job for rubbish. Because that was the whole thing, and none of them had it yet. See, my number barely moves for pipes, bricks, or the slow things on the stairs. That stuff is loose change at a car showroom. The feeding bar wants bodies, better ones every time, and a lot of them. Kevin stopped walking, and I had just been handed a 20-story building absolutely full of them. We started there, the 11th floor. 7 that morning. By 9, everybody knew. The whole camp. They'd worked out what my beast was actually for. James didn't finish anything. That was the part of the deal nobody had expected, and it was the part that made the whole day work. He went through every door first and took whatever came screaming out. Then he pinned the monster. One long arm across the chest, one low hand locked on each wrist, the creature bucking and howling and going absolutely nowhere. James's ugly steel watch stayed under the skin of his forearm. The whole time. face up. Still ticking. While a monster tried to rip itself free of him. And then some guy who sold insurance 3 weeks ago came in behind with a fire axe and did the actual work. I did not hand out beasts. I gave people with saved choices a target they could safely defeat and claim. James could restrain the monster. The survivors still had to accept the bond personally. Nobody else could do that part for them. Kevin ran the queue on floor 11 because Kevin is the kind of man who will make a list of anything. Names on the left, floors on the right. A little tick when somebody came back out of a room with the shakes and a mark going hot on the back of their hand. Travis held the stairwell door with a crowbar. Nobody went up a floor before we'd cleared it. Emma walked ahead of everyone with her rat at her heel and people got out of her way. I thought that was funny for about an hour. Then I stopped thinking about it at all. 13. Every one of them had survived the first trial by defeating an assigned beast and saving the replacement choice. They woke up that morning with no beast of their own and had won by dark. James made it possible. 2.5 meters. Black. 4 arms. James held each monster still. They only had to act, be brave, and then claim what they had defeated. Lee counted the list twice. He kept looking at the tally, then at me, then back at the tally. Like the arithmetic was going to come out different if he was patient with it. Count that. You could have fed those 13 monsters to yours, he said. I don't need 13 weak monster bodies, I said. I need 13 handlers who can bring me stronger ones. I want everything nobody claims. And that was the other half of the deal, and it was piling up in the third-floor corridor faster than anybody wanted to look at. Every room we opened had somebody in it who hadn't tamed or beaten the beast they were given and had gone the wrong shape themselves. Once the axe work was finished, those were nobodies. They were mine. We dragged them down and stacked them along the east wall. People walked past that stack with their eyes very carefully somewhere else. Outside the window, the light over the district had gone down another shade. Nobody said anything about that either. The looter happened on 19. I don't even know his name. He came in with the second wave. He was fast, and he had a habit of getting into a room ahead of the axe and going through pockets. There was a woman lying in the doorway of a flat with a gold chain around her neck. She'd been lying there long enough that everybody had stopped counting her as a problem. He crouched down, got 2 fingers under the chain, and yanked. She wasn't dead. She was just quiet. Her hand came up and closed on his jacket. She was on him before he'd finished standing. He screamed once, properly, the way you only get to scream once. 4 of us were in that corridor. Nobody moved. I watched a man I'd never spoken to get dragged backwards into a flat by something that had been a woman a week ago. I had a beast that could have crossed that corridor in a second and a half. I let the door swing shut. Everybody understood. Nobody argued about it later either, which tells you something about what 3 weeks does to people. We cleared 19 and we moved up. You saw the choice. The 20th floor is where the day stopped being a job. The doors on that landing were already gone, torn out frame and all. The whole floor had been knocked through into one open space, daylight coming in gray from both ends. In the middle of it, there was a pile. I'll be honest about the pile. It was people, dozens of them, stacked and settled the way snow settles. And out of the top of it there was a tree growing. A black tree. About my height, thin, and hung all over with these fat drooping pods that glowed a low, sickly yellow, like a streetlight in fog. It was very quiet up there. That yellow light lay over the whole floor, and everything under it seemed to be moving at the wrong speed. Somebody behind me said it looked like a garden, and that is genuinely the last stupid thing anybody said on that floor. Then the thing standing next to the tree turned around. The long-armed thing stood 2.5 meters tall and was shaped like a man. That was the worst part, honestly. The shoulders, the head, the way it stood with its weight on one side. But its arms came down past its knees and kept going. Thin as scaffolding poles, about as long as a room is wide. Each one ended in a hand with too much finger on it. Lee's people went at the long-armed thing because they were brave and they'd had one good day. 3 beasts hit it at once. It didn't fight them so much as clear its table. One arm went out sideways and took 2 of them off their feet and into the far wall, like somebody sweeping plates onto a floor. The other one reached across nearly the whole room and picked the 3rd beast up off the ground by the head. Somebody was screaming at everybody to get back. Somebody else was already going down the stairs. I stayed where I was, because I was watching the light. Every time that thing crossed under the tree, it slowed. Not a lot, but its arms came around heavy and late in the yellow, like it was reaching through water. Then it stepped out past the pods, and it was quick again. Nobody else caught it. Everybody else was looking at the arms. So I sent James around the lawnway and told him one thing, which was, put the creature under the tree. James didn't go for the body. He went low, took the left arm at the elbow with 2 hands, and pulled. The long-armed thing came off balance and came around 3 steps. 3 steps was all of it. It got in under the pods, the yellow came down over it, and it turned to swing at James far too slowly. That was the whole fight. My beast came up inside those long arms where they were useless. Both low hands went on its jaw. The top set of blades went across its throat and through most of its neck. The head went most of the way off. It hung there. The body came down under the tree and made its own small pile on the floor. The pods swung and knocked into each other over the top of it, still glowing. There were maybe 15 people on that landing. Every one of them had just watched 3 of the camp's beasts get put through a wall by something none of them could touch. Then they watched mine take the creature apart in under a minute. Aaron Lee had blood on his sleeve and he wasn't looking at the body. He was looking at me, doing that arithmetic again. You can feel the room. The tree's mine, I said. Nobody cuts it, nobody touches it, and this floor stays shut. Nobody argued. Nobody wanted the tree. Not up there. Not in that room. A black thing grew there out of 40 neighbors. And it glowed right down over the pile, all night. Kevin wrote the tree down in his little book as property, east side, 20th floor, because Kevin writes everything down. That night I worked down the tower. 20 floors of doors standing open, and the whole building smelling like a butcher's back room. I did it alone, with James walking behind me carrying 2 at a time. The first one went in on 18 and the bar came up 4.5%. I stood in the dark with that number in front of my eyes and did the maths. 22 of these, and we're done. That's one building. That's tonight. The second one gave me 4.5 as well. So did the fourth. Around the 7th body the number got shy. 3, then 2 and a bit. By the 11th body I was getting 1% for a grown man, and I knew exactly what was happening. The same repricing had happened once with a drawer full of kitchen knives. See, the book never wants the same thing twice. Like a shop with stock left over, the book wants better. I fed James everything anyway because I'm not a clever man, I'm a stubborn one. Bodies 12 to 20 went in for scraps, then for slivers, then for nothing at all. I put a whole grown adult into that bar and watched the number not move a single decimal. And there it sat in the dark in front of my face, reading 92% with nothing left in 20 stories to feed James. 92. 8% short in a building I had emptied. And that's when I actually understood it, standing in a stairwell at 2 in the morning with nothing left to give. That last stretch wasn't asking for more. I went back down the stack and put my hand on the nearest one. The book priced him at nothing, same as the last 4. See, the book hadn't asked for more since the 11th body. It wanted a grade up, and there wasn't one in that building. Sameness was worth nothing, like a till rejecting coins for a note. Then I thought of one thing. The building's only exception. The long-armed creature. Nothing else matched. It took on 3 beasts. Put them through a wall, about 4 seconds. 15 people watched. Nobody could stop it. I went back up all 20 floors. The long-armed corpse was still lying under the tree with its head hanging off and its arms out across half the room. The pods were still swinging and glowing over the top of it. I put my hand flat on its chest. The bar didn't tick. It went 92, then 95, then 98, and still climbing while I stood there with my hand on a corpse. That number was coming off a completely different column from the one those 20 bodies had been paying into. 92 to 100% in under 10 minutes. One body. 1. I don't know how to tell you what James was afterwards in a way that means anything. So I'll tell you what he did instead. He came up off the floor of that landing, a whole grade above every single thing in that building, including the one lying there with its neck open. Then I took my knife and opened James's forearm. A good cut, 10 centimeters, right down the plate where it joins. The edges pulled together while I was still holding the knife. Not scabbed. Not sealed later. Closed while I watched. You see the difference. I sat down on the top step. Yellow light behind me through the doorway. I laughed like an idiot for a while. Then I stopped. I'd learned something. The lesson had landed. It cost me. A whole building. 20 bodies got me to 92. One good one finished it in under 10 minutes. And that's the night I stopped asking what the biggest thing in this city was and started asking what the best one was. Travis dropped a sack of rice on the trestle table so hard the table jumped and about 40 people flinched at once. That was the 3rd floor at noon, if you can call it noon under that sky. 2 tables end to end, tins in rows, water in jugs. Kevin stood behind the supplies with a marker and a list, because somebody had to write down who got what. We'd walked the food down from the 11th in 8 trips. My arms didn't even feel the weight anymore, which is its own kind of weird. Within the first week, 1 tin of food had become the price of a full day's work. The queue behaved for about 4 minutes. Then a woman near the front asked why her son's tin was the size it was. The man behind her said something under his breath. And the whole line went from hungry to angry, the way a pan goes, from warm to spitting. Here's the thing nobody wanted said out loud. 27 people lived on that floor under Captain Aaron Lee. 10 of Aaron's people went out and worked beside my crew. 17 stayed behind. 14 still had a replacement they'd never used. 3 had bonds they would not risk. They ate the same portion every single day off the backs of the 10 who did. See, nobody minds carrying somebody for a week. Week 3 turns it into a shared bill, and that's when the arithmetic starts talking. You know that, Bill. That's the last of the rice, Travis said, to nobody. He uses that flat voice when he wants a fight to happen somewhere he can see it. And of course, that's when our boy Mark Dolan stepped up onto a chair. You remember Dolan? Refused the fee, called me a thug, spent a whole afternoon telling anyone who'd listen that I'd dented his door for no reason. He had a way of talking where every sentence sounded like he was defending you personally. I'm not blaming anybody, he said, with his hand out toward Aaron Lee like he was presenting him to a jury. I'm asking a fair question. Who decided 10 men eat first? Anna Park was a meter behind him, nodding, already crying a little, and she is very good at that. My wife hasn't had meat in 4 days, Dolan said. 4 days. And the captain's got a locked room. He didn't say what was in the room. He didn't have to. He just let the word locked sit there and rot. I'd love to be wrong. Somebody show me I'm wrong. 40 people turned to look at a door. That is the whole trick, by the way. He never accused anyone of anything he could be held to. He just kept asking questions until the crowd built the accusation themselves, and then he got to look surprised about it. Aaron Lee tried. He got up on the same chair Dolan had used, which was a mistake. Then he started explaining the ration split with actual numbers, which was a bigger one. 2 men shoved their way to the front of a queue, and somebody at the back threw a tin. It missed Lee and burst on the wall behind him. The smell of tomatoes went everywhere, and 40 people took one step forward at the same time. I didn't say anything. I never say anything at that stage. Nothing you say into a noise like that gets heard anyway. I just brought James in. James came up the stairwell behind the tables. 2.5 meters of black plating, 4 arms, the long pair riding high. People scattered off the wall like water off a hot pan. He walked the length of the corridor past the tables, and he didn't touch a single soul on the way. He used one low arm, flat against brick at the corridor's end. The load-bearing wall. That one held everything. The whole east side. Then he pushed his fist through the wall. All the way. Not through the plaster, through the wall. Brick came out the other side in a spray and landed in the stairwell. There was a hole you could have posted a chair through. Daylight came in where daylight had never been, gray and useless. The dust took a good 5 seconds to fall. Under the plating, his ugly steel watch was still face up, still going round while the wall came down. Nobody screamed. That's the part I remember. 40 people just went completely silent, and one child asked a question and got a hand over their mouth. Picture that. Then I walked to the tables and took a third of the food. Not half. I want to be clear about that, because I counted, and everybody watching counted with me. A third of the rice, a third of the tins, a third of the water. I left the rest on the table with Kevin's list still sitting on top of it. Travis loaded 2 crates onto one shoulder like they weighed nothing, and Emma took the jugs. And we walked out past a hole in a brick wall that was still ticking bits of grit onto the floor. Nobody followed us. Not one person. Not the 2 men who'd shoved to the front. Not Doan, who had somehow got down off his chair and become extremely interested in his own shoes. And the riot was over. That's what I want you to notice. I didn't hit anybody, and I didn't threaten anybody, and I never said one word to that crowd. I broke a wall that had never done anything to anyone, took less than I could have, and walked. 40 people worked out the rest by themselves. Aaron Lee watched me go with my third of the food, and he did not stop me. Here's the thing though, he didn't hide either. He came down off that chair and put himself between the crowd and the tables. Then he told them to form the line again, in the same voice, while brick dust was still in his hair. He looked straight at me on the way past. Not scared. Just doing sums, same as me, and coming out where I came out. He had 27 people and 13 new beasts that could barely handle a stairwell. I had one that had just gone through a wall. He held my eye for about 2 seconds. Then he stepped sideways and started reforming the line. If Aaron had stood there and put himself in my way, he'd have learned something about himself. Everyone was watching. Everyone he led. Then he'd have nothing. Nothing left. Nothing to lead with. So Aaron let me have the food. It cost him, and I knew the choice cost him, and I still took the food. See, that was the first day I understood being right doesn't hand you anything. It only shows what you can't afford, like a price tag seen with empty pockets. 2 floors up, in the flat with the good windows, Drake Fox was already turning what happened at that wall into information. His people had been standing in that corridor when the wall came apart. Fox himself hadn't been, because he never was, and that was always his whole style. Emma spotted 2 of them on the 5th-floor landing that evening, counting us out through the rail. 9 or 10 of Fox's group lived up there, and about 4 had seen the wall come apart. Within a day, he'd found the 2 people in that building most desperate to be important to somebody. Everybody knows exactly who I mean. Do-Loon went, and Anna went with him, and neither of them needed asking twice. They sat in Fox's flat with a plate of actual meat in front of them and answered every question he asked. The questions were very good questions. How tall now? How many arms? Does James get orders out loud or not? Does it heal? What has he been dragging up those stairs at night, and how much of it, and does he ever look tired afterwards? Fox wasn't building a rumor. He was building a picture, one honest answer at a time. Anna Park went up those stairs twice in one afternoon with a tin in her hand nobody had given her. Fox built the picture. 2 people supplied it. Both lived there in the tower. They hated me. More than anyone. They knew the least about me. A bad combination for me. A very good one for Fox. You see the problem. That's when the light over the district dropped another shade, and the afternoons stopped really being afternoons. Emma fixed the information gap. See, her rat could get into anything with a grill, like a spare key made for vents. Fox's kitchen extractor fan vented out over the 5th-floor light well, and Emma sent the rat in through the vent with Kevin's little voice recorder taped along its back. The rat sat behind the cooker for 2 days. Then we played the recording back on the floor of my room, all 4 of us leaning in. And we heard Drake Fox describe exactly how he was going to end me. Not a fight. Fox was very clear that there would be no fight. He'd wait until I was out on a sweep. 4 men would take the door with a crowbar. He would bring petrol. 20 liters. He set the number. Then set it again. Then he'd pour the fuel over James. Every drop. The beast would be penned inside the back room. Set James alight. Hold the door shut until James stopped moving. Burn my beast alive. Then take the floor, the food and the crew, and tell everyone a monster got loose. That was his plan. Kevin wanted to go to Air Unli. Emma wanted to go that night, up 2 floors, and do it first. I didn't warn anybody. Not Lee, not the camp, not the 17. Because a man who's told he's been heard just changes his plan, and I'd rather have a bad plan I know than a good one I don't. I sent Travis instead. Big honest trucker, very publicly cut out of the split that afternoon in front of the whole floor. He had a real grievance, which is the only kind anybody ever believes. He went up 2 floors and knocked on Fox's door. Then he asked what it was worth to know when my beast was out of the building. Fox thinks he's buying a traitor. He's buying the ambush. Travis Stone spent 10 minutes rubbing a brass curtain ring on the leg of his jeans before he went off to sell it. By the end of it, the ring looked like it had come out of a tomb. He held it up in the stairwell light and turned it. Kevin said it looked like a curtain ring. Travis said that was exactly what a magic ring looked like to a man who wanted one. Then he walked up 2 floors and sold it to Drake Fox. We heard all of it. Emma's rat had left a little recorder taped inside the kitchen vent of Fox's flat a week earlier. The 3 of us sat on the floor of my room with the speaker turned almost off, listening to a man plan my funeral in a perfectly reasonable voice. Travis told him the ring was where the whole thing came from. Said I kept it on a string round my neck and couldn't do a single thing without it. In exchange, he wanted a room on Fox's floor and a beast of his own. Fox bought Travis's story. Not stupidly either. He asked good questions for a while, and then he threw out the plan we'd already heard him make. You can see the problem. No more waiting for me to leave the building. No more 4 men and a crowbar on my door. No more penning James in a back room and pouring petrol through the gap. He scrapped the lot, Emma said. Travis just gave him a better one. He laid the new one out like a man reading a shopping list. Lure me up to the 7th floor on a story about a body worth taking. Travis walks up beside me, friendly, and puts a knife in under my ribs while my hands are busy. 6 men on the landing above with the door already open. 20 liters of fuel in 4 cans. A backpack of bottles with ragwicks in them. Every one of those bottles goes on the beast at once, in a stairwell with no windows. Then Fox said the part that stopped me cold. He said fire is the only thing that has ever worked on that thing, and he wasn't guessing, he'd watched. He was right. That was the horrible part of the next 20 minutes, sitting there with Kevin looking at me. I'd tested fire myself 2 nights before, because you test everything or you find out the hard way. I held a camping stove flame under James's forearm and counted. By the count of 8, the black plate had gone the color of the bottom of a hot pan. The arm came away from the flame on its own. James didn't decide to move the arm. It moved. So he's right, Kevin said. He's right. That's worse. It was worse. A stupid enemy gets you nothing but a story. This guy had watched my beast walk through a corridor of monsters. Then Fox went away and thought about it properly and came back with the one answer that actually worked. The only reason he was going to lose was that his newest and most loyal recruit was sitting 2 floors below him, telling us Fox's shopping list word for word. So we took the 7th floor first. We were in place 5 hours early. Kevin pulled the emergency lights out of the ceiling. The whole landing went to that gray nothing you get an hour before dawn. Emma put her rat in the ceiling void above the stairs. James went into the flat at the end with the door pushed nearly shut, 4 arms folded down, absolutely still. The steel watch was still set under the skin of his forearm, ticking away in the dark like a radiator cooling. I sat on the top step with a crowbar across my knees and waited. Outside the window, the light over the district dropped another shade. Fox's men came up at 4:10. 6 men, 4 cans, 1 backpack. 2 beasts out in front. Fox's own, a long gray thing. Its jaw hung open on one hinge. Behind it, a second one. It walked on its knuckles. Travis came up the stairs beside Fox with his hand near his belt, exactly as promised. On the landing, he stepped left instead of right. James took the gray one in 2 moves. First move, he caught the arm, the gray one swung at him and folded it the wrong way at the elbow. That doesn't beat anybody. It just takes one of its arms out of the fight. Second move, he put a lower hand flat on its chest, took the back of its neck in an upper one and pulled. The sound came up the stairwell like someone snapping a fence post over a knee. The gray thing stopped working from the shoulders down. It lay on the landing with its jaw still opening and closing at us, and nothing below that moving at all. 2 moves. Fox made a noise I've never heard a grown man make. The knuckle walker came off the wall at me while everyone was watching that, which was smart of it and useless. I didn't call James. I stepped inside the swing, got the crowbar up in both hands, and hit it 4 times. It came apart in front of me. First hit stopped it, second put it on the floor, and the third and fourth were me making sure. The crowbar bent about 30 degrees on the last one. Kevin was staring at the crowbar, not at the monster. "You didn't call him," he said. "No. Marcus, that was a beast." And that's the bit I hadn't said out loud to anybody, so I'll say it here. Every time James goes up a grade, I get a little of the upgrade. Not the shape, not the arms. The engine. I'd been swinging that crowbar like a man swinging a crowbar, and the thing had come apart like a garden chair. I stood on that landing at 4 in the morning with my hands not even shaking. That's when I worked it out. My own body had quietly got to be nearly as strong as the thing I was pointing at people. Keep that in mind. Then the useful part. 2 of the 6 had beasts of their own, and I took both alive. That is not mercy. I wanted to know something, and you can't ask a corpse. Here is what I already had. The blood-red book tracks what I feed my beast, prices every ingredient, and triggers an evolution when the bar reaches 100%. I pick what goes in and never what comes out, like ordering a sealed box. Kevin put a takeaway menu down on the floor between us and clicked his pen. What I did not have was any idea whether that was the book or just how the world worked now. Because if it was the world, then everybody's beast could be pushed, and I was only ahead because I'd been greedier and faster. So I spent the rest of that morning finding out. I did it in the corridor, with the 3 of them watching and taking notes on the back of the menu. Test 1. Fox fed his own bonded beast ordinary meat, while Kevin watched for a bar or an inherited trait. Nothing appeared. No window, no number, nothing on the beast or in my head. Test 2. Fox's own blood, since it was his beast and his hand was right there. Nothing at all. Test 3. I cut a strip off the gray one on the landing, still alive, still snapping, and fed it to one of the 2 beasts I'd taken alive. It ate the lot in about 4 seconds and then looked at me for more, and that was it. That was the whole result. A wet brick moves my bar 0.03%, and this moved nothing at all, not a hundredth, not a tick. Test 4. Fire, since fire was the theme of the morning. One of Fox's own cans, a rag, a controlled little burn on the shoulder of the other one I'd taken alive. It screamed and the skin went black, and by the afternoon it had knitted itself back to gray. It was not a bigger monster after. It was the same monster with a mark on it. Test 5, and this was the one I actually cared about. I put the blood book flat against the chest of a living, bonded beast and held it there for a full minute. The pages after the first stayed, sealed shut, the way they've been sealed since the first night. Whoever writes in that thing did not write in it for me. That's 5, Emma said, turning the menu over. 5 nothings. 5 nothings. Nothing ordinary we tried that morning moved a bonded beast. The feeding bar was still mine alone, and so was feeding James better metal. Kevin looked at his own beast in the doorway, then at the menu, and crossed the whole column out. He closed the menu. To him, my only way up stopped at James. Nothing scaled past my beast. In this world, other people's beasts grow slowly on what they kill. No amount of my blood or my fire or my meat was going to shortcut that. Same as trying to skip a queue after the door's shut. Today notes. Captain Aaron Lee got up to the 7th floor around 9 with 9 men and his hand out. He had a whole speech ready about executions in his building. I let him get to the end of it. Then Emma put the recorder on the step in front of him and pressed play. We stood there in the gray light and listened to Drake Fox explain the 7th floor, and Travis's knife, and the 20 liters, and the bottles, in a perfectly reasonable voice. It ran 3 minutes. Aaron Lee listened to all of it with his jaw set, and when it clicked off, he didn't say one word. He'd been holding 27 people together with rules, and the rules had just been said back to him in his enemy's voice. I walked Fox to the window at the end of the 7th floor corridor. Mark Do-loon and Anna Park came out of the stairwell doorway at the same time because Fox's men had already given them up. The couple who'd called me a thug over a fee then sold my floor plan downstairs for a room. Anna started explaining. I opened the window. Fox went out first, and he was still talking. Then those two, one after the other, and I didn't hurry about it. Aaron Lee watched the whole thing from 2.5 meters away with 9 armed men behind him and did not move. That is the point. That is why I did it there instead of quietly. Every grudge this building had been carrying went out of that window in front of a witness. By lunchtime, everyone on every floor knew exactly who had done it and exactly why. Yeah, that part mattered. That afternoon, we got paid twice. Emma's rat came out of the ceiling void, a full hand longer than it went in, slick and dark. It bit through the strap of Kevin's toolbox, and the leather went soft and gray around the hole. It had been living in the walls of a building full of dead things for a week. It had gone up a grade on its own, on kills, slowly, exactly like the test said. Emma held it up by the tail, delighted, and told it that it was disgusting. And upstairs, the lantern tree grew its pods back faster than we could chisel them off. That took us the rest of the day. Kevin got a chisel under the first one, it came off in his hand and it did not go out. It sat there in his palm glowing that flat yellow. He carried it down the stairs and the crippled gray thing on the landing slowed right down, the way the long-armed thing had slowed under the tree. See, the tree makes the light, and the pods keep it once you cut them off. We call them crystals. Same job as torch batteries. Emma had been quiet all afternoon with a road atlas open on her knees. She'd found a walled estate out past the ring road, on a lake, 11 kilometers from where we were standing. As far as anyone had ever heard, almost nobody lived in it. I threw a wheel nut off the 3rd floor ledge at first light and actually watched it land. That had not happened in 9 days. The fog had been sitting on us like wet wool. 20 meters, and then nothing. That morning it peeled back far enough that I could count shopfronts all the way down the block. Kevin paced the distance out along the handrail with his thumb, muttering, and came back with a number. About 100 meters. 100 meters of city we could actually see. In a week where the best news was a tap that still ran, it felt close to a holiday. Enjoy the view. Captain Lee had the supply run planned before breakfast went cold. Greenway Market, the big one out on the ring road, 4 streets and a bridge away. 20 people going. 10 volunteers. That tells you exactly how the food situation was looking. 2 weeks earlier, nobody in that building would have walked to the lobby for money. Travis put his hand up first and then put mine up for me. He's coming, he said, to a room that hadn't asked. He's the reason anybody's coming. We went out at 8 with the beast walking point. 2.5 meters of black plate. Rain-free. James's ugly steel watch was still set under the skin of his forearm. Face turned up. People had stopped flinching when James passed. Somewhere over the district, the light dropped another shade, gray going into a deeper gray, and nobody said a word about it. The car park took us before the market did. It was 3 rows deep in cars that were never going anywhere again. Doors hanging. Boots popped. One van sat up on the curb. Its hazards were still blinking. Off a battery that had not quit yet. I started counting the cars the second we came round the wall. That's a thing you should probably know about me by now. Other people looked at that car park and saw a graveyard. I looked at it and saw a shop. The 4 armed monsters came out from between the rows at about 40 meters. 4 arms each. 2 long up high. 2 short down low. Black-brown. Wet-looking. Every one of them had the exact same shape. Same as James. 7, maybe 8, depending on whether you counted the one that came apart under my beast's foot in the first 4 seconds. So that was new. The city had caught up to my grade, and it had brought friends. So much for being early. The wedge, I said. Nobody swings alone. My beast went into the 4-armed monsters the way you'd go into a bead curtain. 2, he pulled apart at the shoulder before they finished standing up. Kevin took an ankle out with the crowbar. Emma's rat went up one monster's back, put its face into the back of its neck. The monster went down hard, stayed there twitching. Poison doing the slow part. 19 cars in the near 2 rows. A red hatchback with the doors open, 20. One got past the wedge and came at me low. I let it come. That is a stupid sentence. It was a stupid thing to do. It still worked. The monster got both short arms into my ribs. I heard them break. Its arms. Not my ribs. My skin held the way it had held every time since I took Iron Skin. I got a handful of its throat and put it through the windscreen of a silver estate, and the glass went before the thing did. 23, I said. Kevin, bleeding from the eyebrow, said, "What?" "Ours," I said. By the time the last one stopped moving, I had the full count. 25 vehicles in that car park, doors open, keys mostly still in them. Bonnet, block, doors, chassis. Call it half a ton of metal in each one, and that is being careful about it. 25 of those, sitting there in rows, wet with fog, waiting. Do the maths. Nobody else was doing arithmetic. Travis had gone quiet somewhere around the garage at the end of the row, and quiet is not a thing Travis does. The garage shutter was half up. Travis went under it before any of us got there. By the time I ducked in after him, he had the thing on the floor of the workshop, torque wrench in his fist. It was wearing blue overalls with a name stitched over the pocket. Travis hit it 11 times. I counted that too, because I count things, and I hated that I did. Travis did not stop when the thing stopped moving. He stopped 4 hits after that, and then he stood there with his shoulders going up and down and the wrench hanging off 2 fingers. When the monster stopped moving, the mark on the back of Travis's hand opened. Summon a random beast, or claim the unbound monster nearby. Travis chose the thing at his feet. The body in the blue overalls straightened and followed him outside. Travis put the wrench in the van and got back in line. Nobody said anything to him. Not Kevin, not Emma, not one of the 10 volunteers who had been calling him boss all morning. There was nothing anybody could have said that wasn't either a lie or an insult. Travis had kept his replacement choice closed since the first day. Now he had reopened it and claimed his beast. The man in the blue overalls never tamed or defeated a beast of his own, and that man was dead long before Travis ever swung. The market itself was worse than the car park, and better. Worse, because the second we got the doors open something came over the checkouts at us that I had only ever seen once. A reacher. Man-shaped, half a meter taller than me, with 2 arms long enough to reach the far wall of that shop without moving its feet. The reacher went for the volunteers. They were the loudest. My beast caught both arms halfway, planted, and flipped the whole thing backward into the freezer aisle. Hard enough to fold the shelving. Better, because that noise brought the rest of it out. A dozen maw crawlers came boiling out of the back corridor, all mouth and shoulders, low and fast. My beast met them at the aisle head. James just took them apart. 4 arms working like a machine built for this, and nothing else. 30 seconds. Maybe less. Then, it was over. James stood in a slick of maw crawlers, plating steaming. He had not taken a single scratch. Nothing worth calling one. Then James went back for the reacher, and that is where the day turned. James got the reacher under him with 2 arms across its chest, and the other 2 folding those long arms up behind it, and he held. James didn't finish the reacher. He was waiting on me, the way he always waited on me. I stood 3 meters away, my hand on a shelf. I felt the pull come up my forearm. That cold tug behind the mark. I only ever got it when I dropped something into him, when the number was about to move. The pull was coming from a thing that was still screaming, still kicking, still very much alive. I got there in 3 steps and had my hand on his shoulder plate before I'd thought a single word about it. "Don't," I said. "Don't finish it. Don't you touch it." Kevin was already moving in with the crowbar up. I put an arm across him hard enough to bruise. See, everything in this city with a pulse had moved. It had moved quietly, out of the problem column and into the shopping column. I was not about to explain that. Not in a freezer aisle. "Rope," I said. "All of it, now." Emma looked at the reacher on the floor, then at me, and I watched her get about half of it. "You want it alive?" she said. "I want them all alive." The squads roped the reacher like a cow. 4 squads worth of tow strap. Ratchet straps off the flatbed. A chain from the garage. Travis brought that without being asked. They lashed both long arms flat to the reacher's own body before anybody untangled the legs. The reacher went into the back of the box van still fighting, and it fought that van for the next 2 hours. We could hear the reacher from inside the store. Nobody enjoyed that noise except me. You see where this goes? Emma kept watching the reacher fight the straps. She expected the ropes to fail before we got back to the tower. I let her keep watching. 4 squads stripped the shelves while it screamed. Tinned food, rice, dry pasta, water, medical, batteries, and everything metal that wasn't bolted down. And somebody opened the storeroom at the back. There were 2 more reachers in there. Not grown. Folded up, pale, half the size, and not moving yet. Around them, laid out in a low ring on the tiles, were maybe 20 eggs. Wet, gray, about the size of a football, and warm enough that you could feel it from the doorway. Nothing was spun around them. Nothing was wrapped over them. They had just been set down, bare on the tiles in a ring. The ring had been swept clean to make room. Behind them, a dozen Greenway staff, still in their green uniforms, stacked flat against the back wall. Like the packaging the whole thing had arrived in. Eaten hollow. Emma said what everybody was already thinking and nobody wanted out loud. They're breeding. I burned that room. Then I told Lee the truth about the nest. That night, we stood on the 3rd floor. In a tower he'd kept alive for 2 weeks with nothing but a schedule and a spine. Yeah, that changed things. It gets worse from here, I said. Not slowly. That storeroom is a month from now. Come out with us. Emma's found a walled estate by the lake, 11 kilometers, almost nobody in it. Heard me out properly. That was the thing about the captain. He never once topped over me. There's a police station, 9 streets north, he said. Armory, cells, 1 road in. I've got people who can't walk 11 kilometers, Marcus, and I'm not carrying them past that. He put his hand out. You're not wrong. I'm just not able. I shook it. There wasn't a version of that conversation where either of us was the idiot, and I've had enough of those to know the difference. So, the groups split. Aaron took the tower and the road north. I took the gate. 6 of his contractors came out. They stood on my side. Nobody asked them to. Frank Curtis, the welder, crossed first. Tom Baker and Diana Foster came after him. Of the 13 I'd helped claim beasts upstairs, 10 came with me, 3 stayed with the captain, and I let them. Emma counted heads at the gate at 9:30 and got 20. 20 people, 1 van with a reacher in the back of it, and 11 kilometers of fog. I should have been thinking about the 11 kilometers. I wasn't. 25 cars sat there in that car park. Doors hanging open. Half a ton apiece. I was going back for all of them, tonight. I had my hand flat on the bonnet. The first car, 10 that night. James took the whole thing apart, like it was made out of cardboard. We did not do it quietly. 20 people stood in a ring around that car park with torches and crowbars. I fed a hatchback to something 2.5 meters tall. Frank Curtis stood at my shoulder saying the same short word over and over. The bar moved on the first one. 4% off 1 car. Kevin heard me say the number out loud, then sat down on the curb. Like his legs had gone. A body was 1. A body was 1 because a body is meat, I said. That's an engine block. Nobody in this city has ever built anything better than an engine block. 25 cars, half a ton apiece, doors hanging open in rows. See, the first one gave me 4%. The fourth gave me 3.5. By car 12, it was down to 2. Same way it always goes. Once James has had a thing, feeding him more of it is like trying to sell the same car twice. That is why I needed all 25 and not 6. I stood there in the wet and did the maths twice because I did not believe the first answer. You know the pattern. Car 9, and the fog over the ring road dropped another shade darker without anything moving in it. Car 19 went in, and James grew a hand's width in front of me. Car 24 went in, and Emma made everyone step back to the wall without being told to. On 25 the bar filled, and James stopped being the thing I had been feeding for 3 weeks. A wrench was lying on the tarmac about 4 meters from James. The wrench came off the ground on its own, turned over once in the air, and went into his upper right hand. Like somebody had thrown it to him. Nobody threw it. Travis swore so loudly that 2 people behind him ducked. The second thing took longer and was worse to watch. Plating came up out of James's back and closed over him from the shoulders down, plate over plate over plate. When the plating finished, there was no part of James left that was a person shape holding a weapon. There was a suit of black armor standing in a car park with a wrench in one fist. James's steel watch was still set under the skin of his forearm, face turned up, and the plate closed around it and left it showing. He went to walk into the stairwell doorway to get out of the wind. He did not fit. He stopped. He had to turn sideways and duck. 3 meters. He had gone up half a meter in about 4 minutes, and the doorframe was how we found out. Then I did the part I had been putting off. See, there is a room in the back of my head. Black. 1 thing in it. I had only been in that room once before, like a cupboard I could open from inside. I went in and I took the wrench trick off James, and it cost me about 10 seconds of not being able to see. I came out of the black room on 1 knee. The bolts round the wheel arch nearest me were shivering on the tarmac like the ground was cold. Marcus, Frank said. Marcus, your hands. I held one out flat and thought about the socket wrench in Frank's open toolbox, 6 meters back. And it came. Not fast. The wrench wobbled the whole way. Like a bird that had never done it before. It hit my palm. Hard enough to bruise. I laughed. At a volume that frightened people who had known me 2 weeks. Frank Curtis put his hand over his mouth and stared at the toolbox like it had insulted him. Do it again, he said. I did it again. Then I did it with the crowbar. Then with a car door. By midnight I was not lifting metal so much as telling it where it already wanted to be, which is when the leftovers stopped being scrap. 25 shells worth of panel, roof, axle, and door was stacked against the wall. Pile taller than Kevin. I did not need a forge, or a fire, or a welder's arm to do anything with the pile. I put my hands on the stack. I pushed with the wrench trick. The stack came in on itself. Tighter and tighter. What came out the other side was a blade, about as long as I am tall. Frank weighed the blade on the wheel scale off the van. 30 kilos. He said no human being could swing it. 30 kilos of steel. Then Frank watched me swing it, one-handed at a wall. I took a bite out of the brick. The second one took most of an hour. 100 kilos of steel. It does not want to fold. I had to lean on it, with everything I had left. When the blade was done, it looked less like a knife and more like a ramp with an edge on it. James picked the blade up out of the pile with 2 hands and held it the way you hold a pen. We met 3 shamblers on the walk back to the vans. They had wandered in off the ring road, slow and gray and stinking. I did not stop walking. First one came apart at the hip. Second one at the neck. The third one I hit on the backswing without looking at it properly. Travis had to jog to catch up. I had not slowed down for any of them. I want you to sit in that for a second, because I did. A walking suit of armor 3 meters tall. A blade in my own hands that no man alive could swing. 25 cars in a pile that was mine. 4 streets from a tower I already owned, in a city that had run out of everything except metal. 20 people who followed me out of a gate at 9:30 at night on nothing but my word. Keep that picture. That pile could have bought more tins than the tower could have stacked. Standing in that car park at 1 in the morning. I made a decision. I want it on the record. Because of what it cost, we were not going to Lake Ridge. We were going back. With this, we could hold Fairview. Then Travis found the tin of peaches. It was lying on its side at the far end of the car park, next to a bag of rice with a split in it and 1 shoe. There was a line of that stuff running out of the market's side door, away across the tarmac. Somebody had dropped this lot while carrying more than they could hold. The trail went to the second block of the same complex. Building 4, the low brown one behind the loading bay, 40 meters from where I was standing. Somebody else had been living off my market. That was the only thought in my head. Neighbors, maybe. People I could trade with, or give terms to, or add. I took Travis, and I took James, and I left the other 18 at the vans, and we walked over. The doors of Building 4 were open, and there was no smell at all, which should have told me everything. The building's residents were in the stairwell. All of them. Every person who had lived in that building, hanging from the ground floor to the roof, wrapped tight in green vine from the ankles up. They were dry. Not eaten. Not torn. Dried, like fruit on a line. Turning very slightly, because the vines were still moving, at the bottom of the stairwell. A tree 6 or 7 meters tall. A face in the trunk. The tree sat in a floor of roots. Roots that had come up through the concrete. A human face. Eyes closed, mouth open. The tree was chewing. The tree was chewing on Drake Fox. I knew the jacket. Fox went out of a 7th floor window at Fairview. 2 days earlier. Something had carried what was left of Fox. 4 streets and a bridge to feed this thing. The face in the trunk was working through him slowly. The way you eat something you are not really hungry for. Travis did not move. I have never been more grateful for anything. James went first. He always went first. The 100-kilo blade came down on the trunk and went in maybe 30 centimeters. The wood closed over it. Then James did not have a blade anymore. Vines came out of the walls behind us. Not the roots in front. Behind us, where nothing had been 10 seconds ago. 1 took his ankle. 2 more took his arms. He tore through the first 4 and the 5th held, and the ones after that were not trying to cut him at all. They were trying to wrap him. Every plate on his body that made him strong also made him heavy. I reached for the metal. That is the honest center of the worst night of my life. I stood in that stairwell with a brand new skill burning in my hands, and there was not 1 gram of metal in that room. A tree is not metal. Everything I had built that night was aimed at the wrong thing. So I opened the book. I have opened that book with my hands shaking before now. The blood book has always had something for me. Each one. Handwriting that isn't mine. Everything after it was sealed. I asked the book for anything at all. 1 word. 1 page. 1 line. For the first time since the eye opened, the book gave me nothing. Not a refusal. Nothing. Blank paper going by under my thumb while my beast screamed 4 meters away. That is why I lost. I am not going to dress it up. Yeah. I lost. A vine took me around the chest. It squeezed hard enough to fold a car. My skin held. That was the only reason I got back out the doors. I got clear. James did not. I could hear the plating grinding. The car park was 40 meters of tarmac. It held 25 cars worth of spilled fuel. Slick. It had been sitting there all night. I had pulled the batteries out of every shell in that pile and stacked them like tins. I brought them up off the ground with an open hand, all of them, and I cracked them into the fuel and I ran. The whole car park went up. The vines let go of the doorway because everything round it was on fire. James came out through it, burning, with vines still on his back, and the roots pulling away from the heat behind him. He was on fire for 11 seconds. See, black armor took most of the fire, iron skin took the rest, like crash barriers in a row. I know exactly what would have happened to a 2.5-meter four-armed monster in that stairwell. 3 hours earlier he had the skin and nothing else. Everything I built that night is the only reason I still owned James at 2 in the morning. Remember that. James healed. Slowly. He has closed a 10-centimeter cut in front of my eyes before now. He spent the whole walk back to the vans working on his shoulder, and by dawn, the cut had not finished closing. It was still closing 3 days later. Travis walked next to me the whole way and did not say one word about it. Not that night. Not to Kevin, not to Emma, not to the 18 at the vans, not ever. He just carried my 30-kilo blade for me because my hands were not right yet. At the vans I told him straight. The people in Building 4 are gone, all of them. Whatever did it is 4 streets from our tower. We are not holding Fairview. We are going to the lake, tonight, in the dark. Nobody argued. That is what 20 people who watched me feed him a car park will do for you. Kevin looked at the split plate on James's shoulder. He stopped asking about that building. To him, the tree had won for good. I did not correct him. Then Travis stood at my shoulder. Nobody else was close enough to hear. I said the other thing. Out loud. So it would be real. I'm coming back for that tree. Before we rolled out, I had one more piece of business. The box van held a reacher, chained at the wrists. Alive and furious. The reacher had been like that since the morning, because I do not bury good stock. I opened the doors and I let James take the reacher whole, still moving. 34%. One boss, alive, off one feeding. Emma got the number off my face before I said it. She made me say it twice. Every single thing about the next month, decided in those 10 seconds. Now do the maths. I got in the front of the van. A burned beast walked beside it. A whole city of things waited for James to eat. I had one thing I could not feed him. Travis took the old river road at walking pace. The fog out there sat about 100 meters thick, and anything at all could have been standing in it. 4 vehicles, nose to tail. 20 of us spread between them. 11 minutes out, something came down off the embankment and folded the passenger door of his van in like a crisp packet. I was out my window before Travis had finished braking. My beast came off the flatbed behind me. 3 meters of black plating, every loose bolt in the road lifting off the tarmac and drifting up around his ankles. James put the attacker face down in the gravel and held it there while I walked over. James was still burned. Hours on, and the whole left side of him was one long open seam where the fire had got in under the plate. Every time that arm came up I could see it drag and catch. The steel watch was still set under the plate at his wrist, face turned up, still going. Frank Curtis looked at the burn a while. Then he looked at me, and decided not to say the thing he'd been about to say. That's one, Travis called, out of a door frame that no longer had a door in it. There were 6 more before we got where we were going. 2 were maw crawlers coming up out of a drain. They lasted about as long as it takes to say that. 1 was a pack of shamblers standing in the road like they were waiting for a bus. Kevin Wells got out with a crowbar and cleared 4 of them on his own. 2 weeks ago that would have been the biggest thing that ever happened to him. 1 was a thing up a tree, and Emma Shaw poisoned it before I'd even seen it. 1 was nothing at all. A shape in the fog that turned and went the other way, and I still don't know what it was. Somewhere over the district behind us, the light dropped another shade, and the fog went the color of dishwater. The 6th one was different. I knew because I heard it before anybody saw it. A sound like a dog running on tile. 7 sets of it, coming in from both sides of the road at once. They came out of the grass at a speed I genuinely could not follow. Long gray things, low, no fur on them anywhere. Mouths that opened further back than a mouth is supposed to. Ripperhounds, somebody called them later. The first one hit Frank's beast side on and took it off its feet like a bag of washing. That beast had been happily beating things to bits all morning. Emma's rat went for one and got thrown into the side of a truck hard enough to leave a shape in the panel. 6 people had beasts out. Every single one was losing. You see the problem. Keep some alive. I was already moving when I shouted it because that's just how my hands work now. I want them breathing. My beast took the 2 on the left. James went through the first one shoulder. First, he pinned the second under a forearm and even burned, even dragging that arm it was not close. I took the 3rd myself. That hound came at my throat and got my forearm instead. It bit down on skin that does not open for a bread knife, so all it managed to do was hold on. I hit the hound once behind the ear with the flat of my hand. It went down, and it stayed down, and it kept breathing. Kevin came round the truck with the crowbar up. He found me standing over the hound with my sleeve hanging off in strips and not a mark on the arm underneath. "You're not even bleeding," he said. "I never do," I said. "Get rope." 4 hounds were alive when it was over. 4 people on that convoy still carried saved replacement choices from the first trial. I stood those 4 in a line. Middle of the road. I gave them a hound each. 3 bonds went fine. The 4th was Dominic Reyes. 22, van driver, quiet. His hound was the big one, the one that had put Frank's beast down and then put it down a second time. He got about 4 seconds in before his knees went. Blood came out of his nose in a sheet. Both his eyes went red right across the white. He stayed on all 4s in the road for a full minute, making a noise I did not enjoy listening to. The bond took, though. That's the thing. It took. Dominic stood up with the biggest beast any of us had except mine, and then he couldn't lift his own arms above his shoulders for 2 days. In this world, bonding above your grade costs your body. Like lifting a weight you cannot put down. Pick the smaller beast. Anybody else fancy the big one? I said. Look at Dominic first. Nobody did. Lake Ridge Estates came up out of the fog about 2 hours after that, and I want to be honest about what it felt like. Since the 3rd floor of that tower, I had been saying the same 3 sentences to these people. This building is not survivable. We are not staying in it. There is somewhere better. Emma had the lines written on the back of her map in that order. I'd been saying those lines for weeks with absolutely nothing behind them. Then the fog thinned out, and there was a wall. An actual wall. Brick, 3 meters of it, all the way around, with the lake on the far side doing the rest of the work for us. Houses inside with gardens. The gate. Clearing what was living in there took me and the beast most of an hour, and none of the creatures mattered. James put the last one down against the wall and stood waiting for the next, and there wasn't one. The gate was the problem. Iron, bent out of its frame, and never going to close on its own again. So I walked into the garden of the nearest house and got both arms around the ugly stone thing somebody had once paid real money for. 400 kilos, near enough. I carried the stone back and set it down in the gap, and it went into the mud, and it sat. 20 people came in through that gate. Then the gate stopped being a way in. It was the first time since all this started that I stood inside something and couldn't find the hole in it. Emma sat down on the curb with her back to the wall and didn't get up for 20 minutes. Travis walked the whole inside line of the wall twice, touching the brick. Kevin found a tap that still ran and shouted about it like a man who'd won a competition. You know what that was worth. The big house at the top of the drive became home. It had the most rooms and the only stove that worked, and I gave it to everybody. I kept the empty one at the far end for myself. The empty house had already been cleared. I worked that out about 9 seconds after I opened the door. 2 corpses in the hall, both the walking kind, both very much finished, both with an arrow through the eye socket, still in, feathers out the back. Not a scratch on anything else in the room. No blood up the walls. Whoever the archer was had stood in the doorway, taken 2 shots, and walked away. I looked at those arrows for a good while and I didn't touch either of them. Then I dragged both corpses into the back room, because the house was still exactly what I wanted it for. That night I emptied the camp. Everything we'd killed on the road. Everything from inside the walls. The 2 arrow ones. The 3 hounds we hadn't kept. The shamblers. The crawlers. All of it. Travis and Frank wheeled the pile down to the far end for 3 hours, and I fed the lot in. The bar had been sitting at 34% since the market. That was one living boss, once in under a minute. When the last barrel went in and the number stopped climbing, it said 84%. I sat on the step of that house and looked at the bar for a long time. 34 for one. 50 for everything 20 people could carry off an entire road and an entire estate. Travis came down at about 2 in the morning with a bottle of somebody's warm cider. He saw my face, and then he looked at the empty barrows lined up down the drive. Do the maths. That's not enough, is it? He said. That's the whole camp, I said. That's every dead thing we own. He didn't ask what would be enough. I think he'd already worked out that the answer had to be big, and it had to be alive, and neither of us said the word tree. In the morning, I fixed the trucks. 2 had come in with their fronts pushed back into the engine block. The 3rd had no door and a bent axle. I put both hands flat on the first bonnet. I pulled the shape back out through my palms. Panel by panel. The metal came up under my fingers like a dent lifting out of a can. 10 minutes each. Frank Curtis had been a welder for 26 years. He stood there through all 3 trucks with his arms folded, and at the end he said, "Right," and went off to have a sit-down. I was starting on the axle when Travis's patrol came up from the water shouting. 4 of them dragged something onto the grass on a tarpaulin. Gray, flat-eyed, gills down the ribs, and hands with skin between the fingers. The creature was still moving. A fishman, out of a lake, nobody had ever had a reason to look inside. Nobody standing on that grass had seen one. Nobody had heard of one either. Then Emma came round the corner of the wall holding 2 arrows. Clean ones, feathers still crisp. She pulled them out of a tree down by the water gate, dead center, one sitting on top of the other at 40 paces. Somebody in this estate could shoot. And whoever the archer was, had been in here the entire time we were unpacking, and had not once come out to say hello. To whoever that was, our whole convoy and James still looked like somebody else's problem. I took that personally. Travis stood on the arrow before he saw it. The snap under his boot stopped all 4 of us on the lake path. He picked the 2 halves out of the wet grass and turned them over in his hand like a man reading a receipt. The arrow was real. Carbon shaft, a hunting head on it, and the break was fresh enough that the split ends were still pale. Travis crouched and found the dragline in the grass, going away from us toward the houses. Somebody in this estate had shot a creature recently, and somebody had walked over afterwards and pulled the arrow back out of it. That way, Travis said, pointing with the broken end at the row of big houses along the water. The grass between us and the houses was flattened in a line, the way grass goes when something heavy gets dragged through it twice. James came off the path ahead of me without being told. 3 meters. Black plate. He moved low through a garden. It used to have a fountain. The burn down his shoulder finally sealed. A dull gray seam. Kevin had his crowbar up. Emma had her rat out on the wall, sniffing. The second arrow came out of an upstairs window and went through the space where my head had been. I did not hear the bow. That is the part I remember. No twang, no shout. Just a hard flat crack off the brickwork behind me, and a shaft standing in the wall at chest height, buzzing. James was already moving toward the front door. I put a hand flat on his chest plate. I stopped him. You can only do that when you are as strong as the thing you are stopping. That was a warning, I shouted up at the window. You'd have hit me if you wanted to. I've got 20 people behind that gate, and none of them are coming through your door. Come down and talk or shoot me properly, but pick one. There was a long pause. Then the front door opened. A woman came out. Compound bow half drawn. All the pulleys. The cables. She moved the way people move when somebody has trained them. Boots, army trousers, hair scraped back. She stood so her body was between us and the doorway, and she never once seemed to think about it. Jade Sterling, ex-army, 3 years out. She kept the bow up the whole time she told me that. You go through me to get in there, she said. I don't want in there, I said. I want to know why somebody in a house full of monsters is worth guarding this hard. The person she guarded answered from the hallway in the bored, flat voice of somebody who has been interrupted. Because I'm the only one still doing any work. Dr. Rachel Cross came out drying her hands on a towel. 40s, glasses, a lanyard round her neck, and the calmest face I had seen on anybody since the fog came down. She looked at James the way most people look at a car they are thinking about buying. 3 meters. Plated. Does he heal? Then she turned round and walked back inside without waiting to see if we followed. The dining room was not a dining room anymore. 2 chest freezers, running off a generator. A row of fish tanks along the window. One held a green, filthy carp. Against the back wall stood a steel dog crate. The thing inside it. A bird's beak on a dog's body. It was not any kind of monster I had ever seen in the street. It threw itself at the bars when we came in. The bars held, and they had been welded twice. That one was a shambler 9 days ago, Cross said, tapping the crate with one knuckle. Somebody's bonded beast. It belonged to a lad called Danny. He's upstairs asleep, and he cried about it for 2 days. I put monster blood in it. Blood and marrow. Out of the fish things in the lake, straight into the neck. Sterling had not lowered the bow. Kevin had gone very quiet. It was a corpse that walked, Cross said. Now, it isn't. It came out heavier, it came out faster, and the beak is new. She crouched down to the tank instead of letting anybody answer. She wrapped the glass beside the carp. This one nobody touched. It came out of the lake 3 weeks ago as a fish you could buy at a market for 4 quid. Look at its jaw. I looked at the carp's jaw. There were teeth in it, in rows. They were growing into the wrong shape from the inside, so the mouth no longer shut. Monster blood could force somebody else's beast to change. That was not what my book did. Cross was injecting raw blood and marrow. The result was slower, less predictable, and came without a feeding bar. Same as putting hotter fuel in an engine and hoping it survived. I kept my face still and asked Cross a different question instead. How many have you done? Ugh, she said. 2 didn't, and I'm not sorry about either of them. I did not threaten her. I have never had to. I told Cross what I tell everybody. A walled estate on a lake. A gate that shuts. A working generator. Meat every day. 20 people. They eat before anyone argues about anything. Her lab moved inside the wall tonight. Sterling kept the bow and kept the job, and nothing in Cross's tanks got touched by anyone but her. Then I told her what I wanted, which was the part she actually cared about. Both freezers, she said. And I want specimens alive. Then say the numbers, I said, because I can't plan on a guess. Cross said the numbers, like she had said them to herself 100 times. Nobody in the room said anything. 4 to 500 milliliters of blood out of a living one per day, Cross said, holding up a measuring jug. A line drawn on it in marker. More than that, and it stops being a living one. 2 to 3 doses to force a change, spaced out. 2 to 3 per beast? Kevin said. Per beast. She set the jug down beside the crate. And its scales. Whatever you take the blood out of, that's the ceiling on what comes back. A fish thing out of that lake bought me a beak. Cross looked up at James for a long second. So you can probably guess what I'd like to bleed next. Travis worked the plan out before I did and laughed once, without much humor in it. You want a farm. In this world, stronger blood sets the ceiling. Same as paying for a bigger mold. You already see it. We had been going down to the water twice a day for a week and killing fishmen on the shore. On the walk back I stopped doing that. 2 fishmen came at us out of the reeds by the boathouse. Instead of putting James through them, I pulled the boathouse door off its frame from 4 meters away without touching it. I folded the sheet steel around the first one like a crisp packet. Then I did the second one before it had finished turning round. The fishmen went into the camp on poles, alive, screaming, both of them. Emma walked the whole way back with her hand over her mouth. The tribe on the shore had 16 fighters left. I split the lads into 3 groups, gave each group a stretch of the waterline, and gave one order: everything comes back alive. No spears through anything. Anybody who kills one out of laziness explains it to the doctor. Then we did the estate itself, house by house, from the gate end inward, and it took 2 days. The light over the district went down another shade while we worked. The middle of the afternoon. It looked like 6 in the evening. Nobody said anything about it. Not anymore. Most of the houses were empty. One had a claw zombie in the kitchen. A horrible fast thing. Hands like garden shears. Frank Curtis dropped a car bonnet on the claw zombie. He sat on it while we chained the arms. Alive on a pole. The last house at the north end had 10 people in the loft. They'd been up there 11 days. We got a ladder to the hatch and brought them down one at a time. 2 of the younger ones came down last. I noticed it the way you notice anything at the time. Barely. Peter Voss stood at the foot of the ladder. He put both hands on the rails. He held the ladder steady while Robert Hayes came down. Then Hayes stepped off and walked away and left Voss standing there with his hand still on the rails. Nobody said a word. We shut the hatch and moved on to the next house. Remember that. The next house was full of builders, and their boss came down last of all, and he came down with a clipboard. Nick Garrett, construction. He ran a site. 30 men before all this. He still had all 30 alive up in that loft, because he had been feeding them out of a vending machine. Guyarut looked at the wall, looked at the gate, and asked me who did the welding. I fed James the claw zombie that night, in the yard, in front of everybody. The crew brought the claw zombie in on the pole still fighting. The bar was sitting at 84%. I put my hand on the monster and let it go in whole and alive and screaming, and the number climbed and stopped. 84 to 93. 9%, out of a thing that had taken 4 men and a car bonnet to bring in. See, a living boss had become loose change. Same as finding pennies after paying a whole bill. Do not miss that number. Geyer Oot looked at the number, then at me, then back at the number. That's it? That's what that thing's worth? To him, I said, yeah. The watch was still there under the plate on James's forearm. Face turned up, ticking away, while the yard went quiet. Cross did not react to the feeding. She was crouched by the crate with a syringe. When she leaned forward, the lanyard swung out of her collar. A photo card. Blue stripe. Redwood Research Center printed across the top. You work there? I said. I walked out of there at 6 in the morning the day the fog came, she said, and capped the syringe and did not look up. Don't ask me what was in the basement. I was going to ask her anyway. I did not get to. At the far end of the estate, past the last row of houses, something went through a garden wall. Not over it, through it. Then it went through the one behind that. The sound kept moving, and it never once came back out toward the gate. Whatever had been smashing its way across that end of the estate was still in there. Travis found the line before I did. A garden wall 2 houses down had been pushed flat into the road. 6 meters of brick lying in the wet grass. Like something had leaned on it. And kept going. We followed that. Every hedge along the row had a hole punched through it at the same height, chest high on me. The gravel between them was churned into ruts as wide as a car tire. Whatever made the trail had crossed the estate in a straight line and had not once gone around anything. The light over the district had dropped another shade in the night, so at 9 in the morning we were walking a garden path with torches. Janes went ahead of us without being told. 3 meters of black plate moving low along the ruts. The loose bolts in the flower beds lifted off the dirt. They followed him like they were on strings. Kevin had the crowbar. Emma had her rat up on the wall. Frank Curtis had brought 2 of the tow chains off the trucks over his shoulder. He's the kind of man who brings chains to a walk. Just in case. We heard it from 60 meters out. Not a roar. A wet, steady, working sound. The sound of a big dog getting through a bag of bones. Under it, a lot of smaller things shrieking at once. The line ended at the big house at the far end, the one behind its own wall. The double gates were folded inward like tin. I went up on the brick to look, and I will be honest with you, I had to hold on to the brick. There was a thing in that garden 5 meters tall. The monster was not shaped like anything. It was a hill of raw meat stacked on 2 legs, gray and red in bands, split open. The weight of it had torn its own skin, and it had a 4-armed monster off the ground in both hands. One of the creatures that had been the ceiling of the entire tower, the kind my beast needed a new grade of body to match. The hill had it up by the shoulders and was eating it from the middle out while it was still kicking. The kicking got weaker while I watched. It never stopped. And it was not alone in there. 24 corpse monsters were on the mountain, hanging off its back and its legs, biting with everything they had, and they were achieving nothing. Not slowing it. Not marking it. One of them was chewing on the back of its knee like a man eating corn. The meat simply closed over the bite, and squeezed it out again. That's not going in a van, Travis said beside me, very quietly. Take it alive, I said. I did not think about it. Travis was off the wall and walking for the trucks before I had finished the sentence, and nobody up there asked me twice. See, a dead one is worth a fraction of what a living one is. Think bruised fruit beside the fresh stuff. That is the whole reason I own anything. Frank looked at the chains on his shoulder. Both? Both. And every can of fuel behind the gate. It took us most of the morning and it was not clean. We pulled the 24 small ones off the mountain first, which sounds like the hard part and was the easy one. Kevin and 6 lads put them down against the wall in about 11 minutes. Sterling stood on the porch roof and put arrows through anything that got in behind them. Then we started on the mountain. 60 liters of fuel went over it. 4 cans. Hand to hand up a ladder, poured down its back from above. James held both its wrists at full stretch, and got dragged 4 meters across a lawn, doing it. Emma lit it. The whole garden went orange. The heat came off it like an oven door. The thing screamed for the first time. A flat bellow with no shape in it. Then it started swinging. It broke Frank's first chain. It broke the porch. The mountain got a hand on James and put him through the front wall of the house. My own ribs went tight, watching that. I have seen exactly one thing beat him. I was not doing that again this month. So I went in myself. I got under it in the smoke with a crowbar in one hand. Every loose fitting in that garden came off the ground when I wanted it to. Hinges, brackets, the iron boot scraper by the door. They went into the back of the mountain's knee in a stream. It went down on one side. James came out of the wall and put both fists into the same knee. Frank got the second chain around the ankle and hitched it to the tow bar of the truck. 10 minutes. That is how long the beating took once it was down, and I timed it on Frank's wrist. Hit a thing like that too hard for too long, and all you own is meat. Don't hit it hard enough and it stands up again. Frank rehitched the chain every time it tore loose, and Garrett's lads swapped out in shifts, 4 minutes on and 4 off. 10 minutes of chain and crowbar and boots on a burning 5-meter hill of muscle. At 9 minutes I pulled 2 of Garrett's lads off it by their belts. At 10 minutes, it stopped trying to get an arm under itself and lay in the flower beds going in and out like a bellows. Alive, ruined, and alive. We fed the hill of meat to James that evening in the yard. The gates were shut. About 40 people up on the wall, watching. They do not need telling. The chains came off. James took it by the head. The steel watch was still there under the plate on his forearm. Face turned up, going round while a hill of meat came apart in front of it. 93% before. 99.5% after. Nobody said anything for a second. Then one of Nick Garrett's lads laughed, the ugly kind of laugh you do when a number offends you. 6.5 points. Do the maths. 5 meters of the best thing this estate had ever produced. 24 monsters could not scratch it. And it bought 6.5 points. That's it? That's all it's worth? It's not worth less, I said. The bar's bigger. 4 more bodies finished it. 4 of the corpse things we had put down against the garden wall that morning, dragged back on a barrow in the dark. They were worth so little that Emma had to go and fetch a 4th when the 3rd did not do it. 99.5%. Then 100%. Then the yard went white. I have watched him change 5 times now, and every time it was the same shape of thing. Bigger, blacker, more of him. I stood there with my arm up over my eyes, waiting for the next set of shoulders. That is not what came out of the light. The back of him opened. Not split, opened, the way a hand opens, and something came out of it low and wide and wrong and kept coming. The plate ran off his legs like water going the wrong way. It gathered underneath into a body the size of a car, black and segmented, slung close to the gravel. Out of that came legs. Long ones. Angled up at the joint, higher than the thing they carried, 8 of them, each ending in a point that went into the lawn and held. His torso stayed. That was the worst part. God. His shoulders. His forearms folded down to 2 heavy ones. A man's shape up on top of that. 5 meters off the ground, looking down at me. Nothing I had ever put into him was a spider. I need you to sit with that, because I could not. I have fed that thing radiators and screws and a van full of crowbars, 25 cars, a floor of corpses, a hill of meat. Not one piece of any of it had 8 legs. Kevin came and stood next to me and did not say a word. I pick what he eats. I have never once picked what he becomes, and for 6 weeks that had been a fun little surprise at the end of a hard week. Standing in that yard, I got it properly for the first time. I do not know what is on the other side of any of these bars, and I have been running at them. Sterling had her bow up, an arrow on the string. 40 people on that wall, and not one of them made a sound. I made myself walk over. Up close, the legs were plated in the same black as always. The joints moved with a small dry click. It lowered its head to me, the way it always does. Somehow, that made it worse. Then I looked at the forearm, because I always look at the forearm. There was no watch. I went round the other side and checked that one too. I put my hand flat on the plate where it had been for 6 weeks. There was nothing under it. No lump. No ridge. No steel band half swallowed. The arm that had carried it did not exist anymore. Neither, I suppose, did the man. I put my palm flat on a leg joint at chest height, and it was warm, and it was not a corpse in armor. It was not a taller version of anything. It was not the same animal. I got the book out of my jacket, and my hands were not steady. Page 1 is where it has always been, in handwriting that is not mine. Everything after it has been sealed shut since the first night. I have tried a knife on those pages. I have tried water. They might as well have been one piece of card. When I opened it in that yard, the page after was loose. Blank. Cream and empty and waiting, with the same faint ruled lines page 1 has. There was one line above it, in that same handwriting. One beast is not the ceiling. Pass the grade, and the book gives you a second page. The spider and that new page were worth every tin inside Lake Ridge. Something had unsealed that while I was in a garden setting fire to a hill of meat. Kevin asked me what it said, and I closed the book on my thumb without answering him. I still do not know whose hand is doing the writing. It has never once answered me when I have asked. Yeah, helpful. Kevin watched me shut the book and let the question go. He had seen an empty page, not another beast. To him, that was no gain at all. I knew what I was putting on it before I finished reading it. I had known since the car park. 6 or 7 meters of trunk. A face in it. 100 kilos of my blade. Still in its side. My beast on fire in front of 20 witnesses. Emma asked me what I was looking at. I said nothing, and she left it alone. Everybody in this camp thinks I have let that go. I have not mentioned it in 3 weeks. I found Cross in the lab and asked her one question. Could a thing that size be baited out into the open? She was feeding a caged fishman with tongs and she did not even put them down. It can't refuse, she said. Nothing out there can. That's the one thing every specimen I've cut has agreed on. Put better flesh in front of a monster, and it eats. It doesn't decide. It's not a choice you're asking it to make, it's a mouth. So that is the plan. Better flesh than it has ever seen, walked up to it on purpose. Which left one problem. I spent the next 2 days on it in the yard. Barehanded, no crowbar, no metal, in front of anyone who wanted to watch. Me against 5 meters of my own spider. I got put down 11 times the first morning. I got a leg joint across the mouth and lost a tooth. Emma stopped counting the cuts on my forearms after the first day and started just handing me a rag. But you cannot copy a thing by reading about it. You have to be close enough. Long enough. Hurt enough to feel it happening in something else. On the second afternoon, I was flat on my back in the gravel. My ear was ringing. I felt it in him. A cut across his shoulder from my own boot nail, closing. Not fast. Steady. Like a tap being turned. I went into the black room behind my eyes, and I took it. I stood up. Emma came at me with the rag. Then stopped. The split across the back of my hand was drawing itself shut. She watched it happen. Do it again, she said. The thing that beat me is still standing in that car park, and I have a page for it. We came into the Greenway car park at 4 in the morning, and the first thing through the gap was fire. Frank Curtis had spent 2 days on the bottles. 100 of them, filled off the last of the petrol, corked with strips of somebody's curtain, standing upright in milk crates. So they wouldn't knock together in the van. Nick Garrett's lads took the ramp up to the second level and started throwing. Nobody aimed. You do not have to aim at a thing that fills the whole east side of a car park. The tree took the first 30 without moving at all. It took 30 more. Around bottle 70, the bark on the low trunk began to run like candle wax. Then the face opened up. And for the first time since the night I met the tree, that thing made a noise it had not chosen to make. Then the vines came off the pillars, all of them at once. Frank was ready for that. He had wired 10 car batteries into 2 long loops of cable and laid them flat in the wet across the base of the trunk. The first vines crossed the copper. He closed the circuit with a wrench and stepped back into the ramp. 10 batteries is not lightning. It is enough to lock up wet wood. Every vine on our side of that car park went stiff at the same second, and the fire finally had something to hold on to. "Those," I said. 5 meters of black went up the ramp on 8 legs. It hit the trunk hard enough to shake ash off the ceiling. The spider did not bother with the vines at all. It went over the vines, up, and started taking the thing apart from the top down. One heavy arm gripping, the other one working. The burning stuff it tore loose came down past us. Pieces the size of doors. Garrett's lads on the second level stopped throwing bottles. There was no longer any point. It took 20 minutes. About halfway down, the spider stopped. Then it put an arm into the split it had opened, right into the middle of the trunk, and pulled out 100 kilos of black metal. The blade came out with the wood still closed around it. The spider held it up in the firelight for about a second. Then it used the blade for the rest. Travis was standing next to me at the bottom of the ramp with his mouth open. "It kept it," he said. "The bloody thing kept it in there this whole time. When it was down to a burning stump, there was nothing left worth cutting." I climbed up over the roots and opened the book. The second page had been sitting blank in my hands for 2 days. I put my palm flat on the stump, on the hot part, and the blank page went dark the way the first one had. The tree came up out of its own ash in under a minute. 7 meters. And the face in the bark was not the same face. It was a calmer one, which I did not like at all. The vines came out of the ground around it fast enough to watch happening. Not creeping. Running across the concrete, the way water goes across a floor. Kevin backed up the ramp and kept backing up. Emma stood there with her rat on her boot and said quite clearly, "Oh, that's not fair." Kevin walked it out afterwards with a builder's tape and a lot of swearing. 200 meters in every direction. See, that was the tree's ground. Anything standing on it was already inside the house. That much safe ground was worth every tin we had. Kevin looked from the tape to the roots and saw a wall. He did not see something I could take hunting. Not yet. There was one new line on the second page when I looked, in that same handwriting that has never once been mine. I went over it twice and closed the book and did not tell anybody what it said. The tree could not walk. Nick Garrett's lads got it onto a flatbed trailer. The roots were balled up in 6 tons of car park dirt. Frank welded the bed rails to stop it rolling from then on. Wherever the truck went, the 200 meters went with it. Turns out the tree liked cars. Not the way the spider liked them. The spider ate them like a man eating chips. The tree put its vines in through the windows, down into the engine bay. Then just sat there. The way it sits. About 10 minutes later, there was a car-shaped stain on the ground. No metal left in it. 1% a car. 10 minutes each. 25 cars had turned the spider into something new, back when it was still small. I stood there with a notebook doing the maths on 100, and did not particularly like the answer. You see the problem. The light over the district dropped another shade while we were loading, and nobody bothered to mention it anymore. We went out for more cars 2 days later, 4 vehicles and a flatbed trailer in the middle of them, 20 of us. We were most of the way to the retail park before Sterling came up the line and told me the tree had something. 2 men had been following the convoy at what they thought was a safe distance. The vines had taken them at 200 meters behind us in the fog. On the road we had already driven. They never saw a single leaf. Not until the ground moved. It made no noise at all. The tree does not make noise. That is the worst part of it. It dragged them up the road to us and dropped them in front of the truck. They got up. Of course they got up. They were fine, scratched and filthy. Absolutely fine. The fresh vines were already coming back across the road behind them in a wall. You could hear it growing. And one of them put both hands flat on his partner's chest and shoved him into the vines. Not a stumble. Not a panic grab that went wrong. He set his feet first. He picked his spot. He put a whole man into the vines to buy himself the 3 seconds it took them to close around something. Then he ran. He got 2 steps. I have thought about a door a lot. Every day since the first morning of all this. I stood on that road and watched the vines take the one who got pushed and lift him off the ground by both arms. And I watched the one who pushed him coming at my truck with his hands up and his mouth already open. It took me about a second and a half. I told the tree to let the pushed one go. The vines opened and put him down on his knees on the tarmac. Then I looked at the other one. I lifted 2 fingers, the way I had been lifting them at that thing all week. I did not say one word to him. 20 of my people were standing on that road and not one of them asked me anything. Travis turned around and started checking a strap on the flatbed that did not need checking. Frank looked at the sky. It took about 4 seconds, and then we got back in the vans and went on to the retail park because we still needed the cars. The one we kept was called Peter Voss, and he talked the entire way home. You would too. A man called T. Sun Hall. Forge Gym, the big place on the ring road with the tires out front. 29 of them living in it. All fighters. Hall himself had a bone lizard. 4 meters of dry white armor. It had gone through a shop front. Just to get at the people inside. They had been scouting Lake Ridge for 11 days. They had been counting our vans, counting our fuel, and working out which night we were thin. He wasn't going to trade with you, Voss said. He was going to wait until your lot were out on a run. I did not turn the convoy round and go home. We drove straight to the ring road with the flatbed trailer in front. 20 men came out of that gym to meet us, and 20 beasts came out with them, and I will give them this much. They were not amateurs. Hall had left 9 people inside. They slipped out through the back while the fight held us on the road, then fled south before we reached the building. Their beasts had plate bolted straight onto them. Actual welded plate, shaped with a lip over the throat. They had 6 ripper hounds. The beasts came at the vans in a spread. Not a mob. Which meant somebody was in there, training them. Kevin lost a wing mirror in the first 10 seconds. Frank put a van door through a hound and kept driving. Emma's rat had 2 of them down inside a minute. She stood up through the sunroof, screaming at her rat like a woman at the races. Hall came last, up the middle of the road on the bone lizard, and he was shouting something about who we thought we were. The spider took the bone lizard off its feet. Straight down the middle. No arms. No blade. 5 meters. Segmented black. Hit 4 meters of white armor at a dead run. It put the lizard through the front of a barber shop, then knelt on it. The noise that lizard made brought every fighter on that street to a stop. They turned to run. That was when they found out where the tree had parked. 200 meters of vine came up through the drains, through the planters, through the cracks in the pavement, all while they were busy with us. The ring road was a room now with walls. 14 of them put their weapons on the ground. Hall was not one of the 14, and Hall is not in this story anymore. We came home with 14 prisoners, 6 working bands, and every scrap of steel in that gym. Dr. Cross was waiting in the yard with a cold box and the first real smile I had seen on her. 15 vials. 15. Out of 7 weeks of work and out of living specimens she would not let anyone look at. They were spoiling in about 6 hours, she said. Then I left a tray next to your glowing rock overnight because I ran out of ideas. 4 days and counting. Lantern crystal light. The thing I had been hauling around because it was pretty. Dr. Cross had already given the selected beasts 2 fresh doses on separate days. We did the final injections in the yard where everyone could see them. Travis's beast took its 3rd dose. Then stood there, doing nothing for 10 seconds. Then it hit a concrete bollard. The top half went over the wall. Power burst in and out in about 3 seconds. Travis laughed until he had to sit down. Emma's rat went from the size of a dog to the size of a big dog in a day and a half. 2 of Garrett's contractors got their beasts up a grade off it, both of them men who had been carrying passengers since the day they bonded. Then I took 6 lantern crystals out of the crate and put them in the roots. That took most of a night. The tree kept every one of them. And at about 5 in the morning, the whole thing lit up from the inside. Every leaf, every vine. 7 meters of tree with a warm yellow light coming out through the bark like a lamp under a bedsheet. Then the fog came apart around it. Not thinned. Not lifted. Gone, in a ring that kept widening and widening while we stood there, and I honestly thought it was not going to stop. 300 meters. That is where it stopped, and the roots reached that far now as well. 60-odd people came out of the big house in their coats. They stood in the yard in the middle of the night, looking at an estate. They had lived in it for weeks and never actually seen it. Frank started laughing. Emma sat down on a step. It was one of the Gym 14 who ruined it. He was staring at the tree like everyone else, and he said, without being asked anything, that there was a real camp out east. Thousands of people. Walls, power, proper soldiers. And for 2 weeks they had been sending people around the district asking the same question at every door. Whether anybody had seen a man whose beast keeps turning into something new. I stood in my own yard at 5 in the morning. The fog rolled back 300 meters in every direction for the first time since the day this started. I could see what was coming. I walked out onto the ring road with nothing in my hands. No crowbar, no blade, not even a wrench in my back pocket. For weeks metal had been doing my work for me, and I wanted the metal gone for one morning. There were about 100 bodies up and moving on that stretch of road. 2 days of clearing shoved into one place, and I went into the middle of them at a normal walking pace. Frank stood on the flatbed trailer shouting something I did not listen to. The spider came in on my left. I made myself watch the spider instead of watching the hands coming at my face. Every time something got a swing in, the plate went hard about half a second before the hit landed. Then the hit spread out across the whole shoulder instead of sitting in one place. That was the part I needed. So I stopped moving and let them have me. Iron skin covered the first 40 or so. After that, I was bleeding at the hairline and my ribs felt like the worst flu of my life. I stayed on my feet in the middle of it anyway. My eyes went to that shoulder plate every single time a body came off it. Somewhere around the 80th one, the black room opened up behind my eyes, the way it always does. There was something sitting in it that I could reach. I took black armor. The next set of hands that came down on me hit skin gone dark and hard. Black armor shared the hit out for me, and my ribs did not move at all. Emma told me later I was black to the elbows for a full minute. She said she nearly threw a bucket of water over me. I finished the last 20 on that road without hurrying. Keep up. Then I fed the 100 of them to the tree. That took most of the morning. The bar walked up in fat, ugly steps the whole time. At 100%, the tarmac around the flatbed trailers split in a ring 12 meters wide. The roots came up. Not lifted. Not tipped. Pulled. One at a time, dragging out of the road. Clods of concrete still hanging on them like a man kicking off a boot. The tree had been 7 meters with its roots in the ground. Standing on those roots, the tree was 9. It took a step, and everybody on that road went backwards at once. Nick Garrett worked it out before anybody else did. We did not need the flatbed trailer anymore. Summit Mall was 6 kilometers east, and we walked it. That is a sentence I would not have believed 2 months ago. The face eaters were waiting on the car concourse. Gray things the size of a big dog, no face of their own at all. Just a wet, flat front like the palm of a hand, and they go for yours. 8 of them came at us across the parking bays. The spider had 6 down before I got to the doors. I did the other 2 myself, one with a fire door and one with my hands. The second one hit me in the jaw and broke its own arm doing it. The vines took all 8 off the tarmac before we reached the shutter. I had the shutter up a minute later, and the tree's bar was sitting at 28%. The survivors were on the top floor behind a wall of furniture. It had taken them 9 days to build, by their own count. Sarah No Bull came out first, holding a curtain rail like she meant it. Behind her were 7 more, all of them the color of paper. They had defeated their first summoned beasts together, and most had kept the replacement choices unused. They had been eating shop stock for 2 months. They had not been down past the 2nd floor since the day it happened. I asked her where the things came from. 8 on a concourse does not explain a dead mall. She said the car park, and not the surface one. The underground, 3 levels of it. They came up out of the ramps on the first afternoon, in numbers she could not put a figure on. Hundreds, she said, the way you say a word you have practiced saying. She had watched them come up for 2 hours, and then she had stopped watching. That is when I stopped caring about the mall. Sarah had already worked out that I was the evacuation. She had her people lined up at the escalator with their bags packed before I finished my water. I put the cup down and told her nobody was leaving. I wanted a guide, and she wanted to argue about it. We did that for a while, and I was not really listening. Outside on the surface deck, the spider was working its way along the abandoned rows, and somewhere around the 22nd car, something in my own chest clicked over. I looked at a shutter 12 meters away across the food court and pulled. The shutter came off its rails and hit the tiles hard enough to put Sarah 30 centimeters in the air. It used to be 6 meters and a lot of wobbling. That shutter came off a wall 12 meters away. And a mall is nothing but metal. 3 of them agreed to guide us. 2 shop fitters and a kid called Dean who had done 4 years of night shifts in that building. He drew every service ramp from memory on the back of a menu. Level 1 was 25 to 30 face eaters. It was the easiest work I have ever done. The vines went down the ramp ahead of us in the dark and took them off the pillars. The tree ate them where they hung. The bar went from 28% to 87% in under an hour. Halfway down, one of the shop fitters spent the replacement choice she had saved since the first trial. She put her hand on a thing the vines had pinned. The bond took, and the face eater came up off the concrete with her, low and gray and stuck to her leg. Dean spent his choice the same way, 20 minutes later. So did the other shop fitter. 3 new bonds on a ramp, in the dark, out of a group that had not been down 2 floors in 2 months. Take notes. Level 2 took the mood out of everybody. The bodies were laid out in rows. Not dumped, not piled, laid out, arms at their sides, feet together, 500 or 600 of them. The rows ran away into the dark under the sprinkler pipes in lines you could have walked down. There were black worms about the length of my forearm moving between the rows. Every one of them was working its way into the back of a neck. The ones that were finished had a raised ridge under the skin, all the way down the spine. 2 clawed giants were doing the laying out. 3 meters each, long flat heads, arms down to the floor. They were carrying bodies in from the far ramp 2 at a time and setting them down straight. One giant stopped to square up a man's shoulders before it moved on. Nobody on that ramp said anything at all. Sarah put her hand over the kid's eyes and he pulled it off. The vines went in, and the first giant came straight through them. The giant was up the ramp into us before I had room to get the spider turned. It went over the top of Dean and put a worm into him with its thumb, and I heard the worm go in. I got the vines into its ribs, and it hauled the whole length of them back into the dark with it. On the way, it went through a maintenance drum. The drum came apart. Then there was fire in a car park holding 2 months of leaked fuel. The tree is wood. I had not once thought about that. The vines came off the burning end of level 2, smoking and shriveling. I pulled them back up the ramp. Both giants came up after us into the smoke. Dean was face down on the slope with his back already ridged. Sarah was screaming at me to do something, and there was nothing to do. We were going backwards up concrete with a wall of black coming behind us. That was the first ground I had lost since the tower. Travis stopped on the ramp and turned around. His beast took the second giant head on and got driven back 3 meters. Then Travis's beast stopped being driven back. 10 seconds of nothing, exactly the way it had gone in the yard. Then a hit that took the giant's arm off at the elbow and folded the front of a parked van behind it. 3 seconds, in and out, and Travis was already dragging his beast backwards by the shoulder before the giant hit the deck. It bought us the ramp. Everybody above him on that slope walked out because he stood on it. We came at level 2 a second way. The goods lift shaft on the east side, off the map Dean had drawn on the back of that menu, in behind the fire instead of under it. The spider took the giant that had lost its arm and I chained it. The vines took the other one off the top of a body it was still carrying. We chained that one too. The last face eaters out of the level 2 rows put the bar over. At 100%, the vines came apart down their whole length and remade themselves. Thicker, wet, ridged on the inside. The first thing the new ones did was take a giant's chain out of my hand. 2 tons of monster went across the floor without the tree leaning. Man-eating vine, and it earned the name. Level 3 was 300 cars. 100 tons of metal and better. The spider went down that ramp and ate the whole floor over 2 nights, while we sat up on the mezzanine eating shop stock with Sarah's people. On the second night, the plating came off its shoulders and did not fall. It hung in the air around the spider, drifting, and then the whole thing opened out. Shields down one side, long thin blade wings down the other, and everything metal inside 10 meters came along for the ride. The shot fitter got her belt buckle pulled out of her jeans from across the ramp. Level 3 cleared. I fed the burned one to the tree while it was still kicking. That bar closed as well. The new thing came out of the vine tip like ink into water. I tested the poison on the one we still had chained. 3 meters of claw giant went down on its side inside 4 seconds. Eyes open, jaw working, nothing else on it moving at all. It was still lying there like that an hour later when we drove out. Out of the ramp and into open air, the tree kept going up. 20 meters in the mall forecourt, with a face in the bark you could read from the far end of the car park. The light over the district picked that day to drop another shade. We came up out of that car park with new grades worth more tins than the mall still held. Home was 90 people by the weekend. Nick Garrett's crew brought in 2 dump trucks and 60 tons of metal off the industrial estate. The vines went out over Mirror Lake and dredged it. Every fish in that lake landed alive and flapping on the shore in one afternoon. Divers pulled 26 eggs off the pillars under the boathouse. Kevin counted them twice because nobody believed him the first time. Cross would not eat with us that night. She had the fish laid out in her lab and she said, carefully, that some of these things had not been broken by anything. They had been built, stable, finished, breeding true. If that was right, she said, then this flesh was food and not poison. Then she asked who exactly had been designing an ecosystem in her city for 2 months. Nobody answered her. There was one new line on the second page in the morning, in that handwriting, and I did not read it out. Frank had 40 crossbows finished by Friday and 1,000 bolts stacked in the garage. 30 of us were going east to the Redwood Research Center, because whatever started all of this started there. One thing before we go east. It's the only time in this whole story. I'm going to point the camera at a place I wasn't standing in. 100 kilometers south, there's a camp called South Gate. 2,500 people behind a real fence, with real soldiers on it, uniforms, ranks, rifles that still had ammunition in them. They ran patrols on a schedule. They ran a kitchen. They wrote things down in a ledger, which by that point was the strangest thing I'd heard of anybody doing. And in a school hall in the middle of all that, a professor had a wall. Every single person came through that gate. Their right hand got held out. Their mark got copied onto a card. The card went on the wall. There were hundreds of them by then, in rows and in order only he understood. He'd sit in front of it half the night shifting cards about like a man doing a jigsaw with the picture missing off the box. Whatever he was hunting for was not on that wall. So he kept sending squads out to find it. Right, back to me. Our gate came open at 6 in the morning, with the lake still black. 30 of us rolled east, 9 vehicles, 40 crossbows, 1,000 bolts, the spider up on a flatbed with its plating drifting round it. The tree walked behind the last van at the speed of a bloke out for a stroll. 20 meters of it. You could hear it coming through the dark from about 800 meters back, which is a thing I never got tired of. 6 kilometers short of Redwood, Emma made Travis stop the front van. She'd seen a shutter come down on a rice warehouse, and shutters don't come down on their own. 23 people were living in there on stacked sacks. They'd been eating raw rice for 2 weeks and were in the state you'd expect. We put them in the back 3 vans. 2 of them turned out to be wearing lanyards I'd seen before. The same lab. The same photo strip. The same little redwood crest. Cross had never once explained it to me. The researchers had got out of that basement in the first week, and they went gray when I told them where we were driving. There's a Southgate unit in there, one of them said. 50 of them went through the gates 2 days ago. Nobody's come back down the road since. 2 days. Not a coincidence then. A clock, and it had been running for 2 days without me. We came up the access road into somebody else's disaster. Redwood was 3 long white buildings round a courtyard, and the courtyard was full of noise. Rifle fire, short and panicky. Men shouting the same 2 words over and over. And in the middle of it, 2 things that had no business being in the same place. The first one stood 7 meters tall at the back of the courtyard and carried 2 tails up over itself. Every few seconds one of those tails snapped forward and something came out of it in a straight dark line. The shot went through a riot shield and then through the man behind the riot shield. It left a hole in the wall behind him. You could put your arm in it. It was firing blood. I want to be clear that I hated learning that. The second one you couldn't see most of the time. It came up out of the ground where the floor was concrete. 10 meters of it. The front end was nothing but a ring of teeth turning one way, while another ring turned the other. It didn't bite. It drilled. 2 soldiers went into the drill and the noise stopped being a noise you could listen to. And the 2 of them hated each other. That was the only reason anybody was still alive in there. Every third exchange, the tails snapped at the drill instead of at the men. The drill went under and came up trying to take the tails off. 50 had come in. I stood on the roof of the van and counted 32 of them still on their feet. There was a knot of soldiers pinned behind a burnt-out fuel truck. One of them was crying and talking at the same time. Which is how I heard it. He was told. He was told. He said it twice, and the second time he said it to me, a stranger, because he had to say it to somebody. The recon said, don't. The recon said the courtyard's got 2 of them in it and one's under the floor. He said we'd walk in behind them while they were busy. He said they'd do half our work for us. Their officer had walked 50 people into that on purpose. I filed that away and I did not forget it. Now, here's where you might expect me to say something noble, so let's not. Travis came round the van with a crossbow he had no intention of firing and asked me what we were doing. And I pointed at the 7-meter one and then at the hole in the ground and I told him the truth. Look at the size of those 2. He looked at me. Every corpse in that mall, all 300 cars, the whole lake, that's what I've been shoveling in for 2 months, I said. Those 2 walk in on their own legs. I'm going in for them. Whoever's standing between me and them can come out on the way, and they can call that a rescue if they like. Travis said, yeah, all right, and started moving people, because Travis had known exactly what I was for since about the 4th day. So, we went in. Spider through the fence on the left, shields opened out. Tree coming up the access road behind it. Everything metal in that courtyard lifted about 30 centimeters. Rifles, shield rims. A fuel cap. The buckles off dead men's webbing. It traveled with the spider. Like the spider was towing weather. The 2 of them stopped fighting each other in about a second and a half. That's the bit I hadn't thought about. They'd been at each other's throats all morning, and the moment something walked in that outclassed both of them, the argument was over. The tails came round. The floor split 40 meters away, and the drill came up already turning. They came at me together. The first blood arrow took the spider high on the shoulder, and I felt it in my own teeth. That was the drifting plate, the armor that had gone through a breeding floor without a mark on it, and it cracked. Not dented. Cracked, right across, with a line of gray opening up under it. The second one went through the same crack and out the other side of the shoulder. I put every shield the spider had on that side, and the drill came up under the shields. 10 meters of it. Straight up out of the concrete. A shield plate the size of a garage door came apart into pieces small enough to whistle. One of them cut Frank Curtis across the scalp 40 meters back. The spider went down on 4 legs. Not knocked back. Down. I want to be honest about this part, because I got used to a certain feeling by then and I did not have it. Since the car park I'd walked into everything knowing how it ended. The spider was on its knees. Blood came out of the air. Sideways. Standing in that courtyard, I did not know how it ended. Travis shouted my name twice from behind the van and I didn't answer him. That was new, and I hated it more than the blood. The tails came up for the shot that finishes it, and 200 meters of vine came over the roof of the west building. The tree had walked its way round the outside of the whole site while they were busy with me. Vines came down off that roof in a green sheet. They took the 7-meter one round both tails first, then round the body, and hauled it off the ground with its legs still cycling. The floor cracked open again under the tree's own roots. The drill came up into the middle of them, which is exactly what you don't do. About 60 meters of vine went into that hole after the drill, then brought the whole thing out into daylight, coil by coil like a man pulling a rope out of a well. Both of them, off the ground, in the air, thrashing. 32 soldiers stood there in the wreck of the courtyard, waiting for me to kill 2 things. Those things had just killed 18 of their mates. Here's what I said instead. I said it loud. I wanted the ones behind me to hear it, and the ones in front. Nobody shoots. Nobody touches them. The spider dragged itself back up onto 8 legs behind me. Dead, those 2 are meat, and meat's worth nothing to me anymore. I outgrew meat about a month ago. Alive? The 7-meter one screamed, and a tail came half free and put a blood arrow through the roof of the west building. Nobody moved. Alive, those 2 are worth more than everything I have ever fed my own 2 put together. All of it. The building, the car park, the mall, the lake. Both of them, on their own, beat that whole pile. Then I told the tree to hit them with the poison. It's in the vine tips now, and it doesn't look like anything at all. The 7-meter one stopped screaming mid-scream. The tails went slack in about 2 seconds. The whole thing hung there. Its eyes stayed open. Its jaw kept working. Nothing else on it moved at all. The drill took 4 seconds because there was more of it. Then 10 meters of monster hung in the air over a courtyard full of soldiers, turning slightly. Wide awake. Completely unable to do a single thing about any of it. Frank had chain on the ground before it stopped swinging. A cut ran down his scalp. Blood filled one eye. He told Nick Garrett's lads exactly how he wanted it wrapped. 2 of them. Both alive. A whole grade above anything any of us had ever put a hand on, and they went home in chains on a flatbed. Either one of them was worth more tins than our whole camp could store. The rest of the courtyard broke the second the big ones went up. Everything smaller in that compound had been feeding off the edges of the fight all morning. When the 2 things at the top stopped being in charge, the whole lot came apart at once and ran for the fence line. Between 32 soldiers with rifles, 40 crossbows, and a spider in a bad mood, that took about 6 minutes. 1 dead on my side. A lad from the mall, on the fence line, doing what he'd been told. 4 wounded, Frank's scalp included, and he complained about the stitches for a week. Their commander came across the courtyard to me while people were still lying down where they'd stopped. Big gray-haired bloke, sidearm still buttoned, no shouting in him at all. He said his name was Lucas Bell, and then he did something that took the whole floor out from under me. Stairwell, he said. Tower block, north of here. A man took an arm off a beast in a stairwell with his hands, and then stood in front of 27 people and told them his terms before he'd help any of them. He looked at the flatbed. A captain out of that tower told us that story 6 weeks ago. He'd walked to a police station with 9 men and he wouldn't shut up about it. Jaeger Lee. 40-odd days gone. Still talking about me. That story was all he could tell. He'd left the tower long before there was a second anything. That was the first half, Bell said. The second half came from the 9 people Hall left inside Forge Gym. They fled south after your convoy left. Different story, that one. Theirs had 2. So that was it. That's what the professor's squads had been walking out of that gate for. It had taken them 6 weeks and a burning courtyard. They put one story on top of the other. Then they got a man out of it. Then Bell turned round and did the other thing. The officer was over by the fuel truck, giving orders again. Loudly. The way people do when they want the last hour to have been somebody else's. Bell said the officer's name once. Then he took the paper out of his own top pocket. He relieved the officer of command. Right there in the open. 32 of his own soldiers listened. About 50 of mine did too. He didn't raise his voice for that either. 50 came in, he said. 32 are standing. You don't get to keep them. Then he asked me to come to South Gate. Not to join up. He was careful about that. 2,500 people, walls, a kitchen, a doctor, a professor who'd want an hour of my time. And whatever I wanted on top. He said I could name it, which told me he'd been listening to Air Unlee's story properly. Like I said, no. I've got a wall of my own, and a house, and 90 people who eat because of what I feed. I'm not handing that to a bloke with a rank. But I didn't dress it up, and I didn't burn it either. I told him where the lake was, and I told him the gate opens for him. He said that was fair, and that he'd come. We drove home with 2 of the biggest things anybody in that convoy had ever seen, chained to a flatbed. The light over the district dropped another shade on the way. They went into the annex at the far end, the empty house nobody else goes near, and there they stayed. I did not feed them. I stood in that yard for a long time with the 2 of them awake and looking at me. I did not do it. If you want to know why, it's this. Nobody in this story knows who opened that eye over the city. Nobody knows whose handwriting is on page 1 of my book, or who put a new line on the second page every few days while I was busy. Cross asked who'd been designing an ecosystem in her city for 2 months, and none of us had an answer. But 100 kilometers south, there's a professor with a wall of marks who thinks he does. So, that's where I got to. A little over 2 months in. A spider and a tree. 90 people. A lake. Two of the biggest things anybody had ever seen, sitting in a cage, waiting for me to make up my mind. Because here's the thing I've never said out loud to any of them. I picked what James ate every single time. I have never once picked what James becomes. And there are two things in a cage in my back garden worth more than everything I have ever fed him.